Hey everyone, I am a minute and a half early, unheard of. So I'm going to give you a minute's worth of history because Cricket asked a very good question. Is this the boy in the box case from decades ago? Because that's where anyone who knows of the case, that's where your mind goes, because that case went on for 50 years and was unsolved, maybe 40. And that was the case of Joseph Augustus Zarelli. And Joseph was called the boy in the box because he was found in the woods in a cardboard box. And he was 4 years old at the time. He was naked, beaten, and just, in horrible condition. And they were never able to figure out who he was, who his parents were. There was so much speculation over the years. And finally, just within the last year, genetic genealogy helped solve the case, and they were able to determine who his mother and father were. And they were not together as a family. It was, kind of a not good situation. And the mother had several other children that had health problems and things like that. So the common theory is that he wasn't healthy at birth, continued to deteriorate, and was hard to take care of. But there's no way to know because they are long gone. He does have siblings that are still living, and they were able to contact them and let them know what was going on. Can you imagine? Like, all of a sudden you get a call, you had no idea you had a brother, and they're like, yeah, you had a brother, but he was found dead in a box how many years ago? It just, what they can do with genetic genealogy and all those things just blows my mind as it relates to cold cases. They are solving so many cold cases. It's unbelievable. So this is a different boy in the box case. His box was much bigger and it was in the garage. And I am going to stop talking. I see my computer, sorry. And put together a little background montage that I put together to try and give you the information of how this case came about based off of the police report that I read, some news articles, whatnot. And then we will jump right into opening statements.
Boy was allegedly kept in an 8x8 room in a garage for several years by his adoptive parents. Timothy and Tracy Ferriter were arrested for aggravated child abuse and false imprisonment after one of their adopted children was reported missing.
Okay, so I have completed the background research on this one, and it is going to be tough. This is mom and dad. They are accused of keeping their adopted son locked in what has been referred to as a box in their garage for a very extended period of time. They're officially charged with aggravated child abuse, false imprisonment, and neglect of a child. This all came about when a contractor went to the Jupiter police and described to them this room inside of a garage that he was asked to build. It had unfinished drywall for the walls. It was a bare concrete floor with an indoor-outdoor rug on it. There was a Ring camera mounted in the ceiling, a light switch on the outside, and the door knob and lock were on the exterior. Right around the same time, a 13-year-old boy went missing. The boy was said to have behavioral disorders and was having trouble at school. They thought that's why he was missing. So 2 officers went to the home of the parents, the Ferriters. They were not home the first time they went. They went back a second time, and the wife was home, but she said she didn't feel comfortable letting them in the house without her husband home. After a long conversation, she agreed to let one of the officers in, but not the other. So that officer went in, looked around, and that's when he discovered this room. He made note of everything, didn't find anything that he thought would help him locate the child, and ultimately left. The following day, he received a notice that the child was seen near the school campus. They ultimately located the child at the school campus and brought him in for questioning. They confirmed his identity, and they discussed his living situation with him. According to the police report, he spent the majority of his time in his room. He would wake up in the morning, be in his room until one of the parents returned home from dropping the other siblings off at school. He would be fed breakfast, which consisted of a banana, a piece of bread, and peanut butter. And then when he was finished eating, he'd go back in his room, get ready for school, go to school. When he returned home from school, he would go back into his room. The child mentioned that he did not feel safe at home, and that it's redacted, but I assume he's talking about one of the parents, would get really aggressive towards him, and that they had slammed him against the wall by the neck and struck him in the face with an open hand. When asked how often it happened, he stated that it happened a lot more in Arizona.
Hey, tonight, WPBF 25 News got a hold of exclusive documents that reveal that couple's past encounters with Child Protective Services when they formerly lived in Arizona.
We learned deputies in Arizona reported the case to the Department of Child Safety. A 14-year-old runaway saying his parents were spanking him with a leather belt and a jump rope. Similar allegations to the ones he made to Jupiter Police. We just obtained the Pima County Sheriff's Office reports documenting 2 investigations. Pima County deputies in November 2021 were responding to a runaway child report made by the parents. When they found the boy 2 days later, the report says he was shaking and very scared. The report says the boy told them he, out of all his siblings, was the only one that gets spanked, and he gets spanked with a jump rope and a leather belt. It goes on to say his mother recently had restrained him up against the wall and began yelling at him. When deputies found the boy, they say he kept changing his story about where he'd been and who with. Deputies writing, "At this time, we knew that he was lying." Deputies say the teen also had credit cards and other items that did not belong to him. I just emailed the parents' attorney, Nellie King. She says the Arizona Department of Child Safety concluded the allegations of child abuse by the boy were unfounded. She says that finding is substantiated by sheriff's investigators who determined the boy's statements to them were untruthful. The parents claim the boy has a history of problems. They remain free on bond, while DCF has taken temporary custody of their other 3 children.
As part of their initial investigation, it says that the detective traveled to the previous residence, and while the address is redacted, my investigation says that that residence was in Arizona, and they spoke to someone, it doesn't say the relationship, and they stated that the prior owners had a creepy room in their garage. The child told law enforcement that the longest he could remember being locked in his room was approximately 16 to 18 hours, and that he was provided with a bucket to go to the bathroom, stating that he had had to use the bucket several times in the past, and he was made to dump it out in the backyard and then clean it out. His meals usually consisted of leftovers from whatever the rest of the family ate, and that he ate his meals in his bedroom. After the interview, the child asked if he could be arrested so he would not have to go back to that home. He said he would rather be in prison. And the officer asked him if he was having suicidal thoughts. He said yes, and he was ultimately Baker Acted. The Baker Act is a 72-hour mental health hold in Florida. It has different names in different states. Following this, members of the Special Victims Unit of the Florida Department of Children and Families, as well as one of the officers, went and spoke to the other children. The one that they spoke to, that's mentioned in this report, confirmed what this child had said. The sibling got very upset and said that they wanted to do the right thing. Based on the statements of those 2 children, they were able to obtain a search warrant for the Ring device that was located in the ceiling of this room. There were thousands of videos that showed the child repeatedly being locked in his room daily. And each day he was placed in his room, you could hear the door close and the deadbolt lock. In several of the videos, you could hear and see redacted and Timothy Ferriter yelling at the child. In one video in particular, redacted, was locked in his room after being found to have stolen, in quotation marks, chocolate and cookies from the kitchen, despite being told he was not allowed to have them. This behavior resulted in the child having the covers removed from his mattress picked up and tossed against the wall, and Timothy grabbing the child against the arm and yelling at him. Each morning when Timothy greets the child, he asks him, "Is it dirty?" and points to the bucket the child has to use to relieve himself in the middle of the night that is kept in the corner of the bedroom. In one video, the child advises the bucket is dirty, and Timothy yells at him to go clean it out. Based on the information discussed so far, authorities issued an arrest warrant for Timothy Ferriter, and they charged him with 2 counts and then later amended those counts to the ones that I listed earlier, as well as charging his wife as well. There was 30-something pages of documents and events leading up to this trial. I read as many of them as I could. A couple things that I found interesting that I wanted to share with you are things that were in the motion in limine. The state's first was to exclude a doctor. There's been a couple they want to exclude because the evaluations were subsequent to the defendant being charged, not a material fact. Another thing that they're trying to exclude is evidence from an incident that happened with the child after he was taken out of the parents' custody. I'm not sure if I said it or not, but all of the children were removed from their custody when this happened. And it appears that the defense is trying to bring in incidents that happened after the child was removed, which personally, I find it hard to attribute that to the child himself, because it could easily be attributed to the trauma of what the child went through living in that situation. Permit the defense to discuss professional interventions taken with the child not related to his or her diagnosis or specific treatment interventions by facilities after his removal from the home. Preclude the state from arguing the child's room was a box or cage. Exclude all statements from co-defendant, Tracy, the mom. Exclude all evidence that the co-defendant altering items in the child's room. Preclude the state from utilizing the term target child. Preclude redacted from testifying about her thoughts, beliefs, and otherwise speculation regarding the acts of her parents. Okay, so one of the siblings. They don't want one of the siblings to comment on what she believes her parents were doing towards the child. And they also want to prohibit the child, or 2 of them, from using a therapy dog during testimony. Like, why? Why does that matter? And also admonish witnesses that they can only state facts that they personally witnessed, not speculation or embellish. As I mentioned before, there was a lot going on pre-trial. I can't remember if I said it specifically or not, but they did determine that the parents would be tried individually for these charges. Further, the judge ordered that the evidence that was gathered from the incident in Arizona will be allowed in, and this could be beneficial for the Ferriters, as the Arizona CPS and law enforcement ultimately determined that they believed the boy was lying. This was due to him having stolen some money from, I believe, a teacher or a tutor, and several other things, although his statements in Arizona were strikingly similar to his statements here in Florida, so that could be used against them. We'll have to wait and see. The state planned to present evidence from the family's home computer that was showing a search history that was potentially damaging to the Ferriters. However, they're claiming that their email was hacked and that one of the children actually took a video of themselves going through the search history on the computer, and they're, I think, challenging its authenticity.
It's a story from our area that made national headlines. Jupiter parents accused of locking their teenage son in a box for hours at a time. Today, that couple was back in court with their lawyers, who were trying to get evidence thrown out and a prosecuting attorney removed from the case. WPTV's Cameron Eppinger in the courtroom. He joins us with what happened today.
I'm Cameron Eppinger. The Jupiter couple accused of locking up their 14-year-old inside a box in their garage was back inside the Palm Beach County Courthouse today, where their lawyers tried to get evidence thrown out and a prosecuting attorney removed from the case. Inside the courtroom, Timothy Ferriter and his wife Tracy sat side by side holding hands as the judge heard from their attorney.
Motion for protective order, motion for production of all communications regarding evidence unlawfully obtained.
The couple from Jupiter faced false imprisonment charges and aggravated child abuse for allegedly keeping their 14-year-old locked up in a box inside their garage. In court today, their lawyer, Nellie King, tried to get potential evidence thrown out.
It's the fact that they unlawfully obtained it through one of the witnesses who is a kid.
The evidence in question was a minute-long video of the parents' search history. King claims her client's email account was hacked by at least one of their own children, who then sent the video to the Department of Children and Families and a lawyer with the Foster's Children Project legal aid.
When you watch the video, they scroll through the same searches that seem to be of import to the person who's obtained this over and over again and then highlight them.
The defense also asked to have that lawyer removed from the case, an issue that the judge said should be taken up in dependency court instead of criminal court.
You're asking to suppress something for the state to use that they don't have, that they've never seen, which takes me back to what I said at the beginning. This seems premature to me.
In the end, the judge ultimately denied the motions, citing the defense was unable to prove the children were told to hack their parents' computers.
At this stage, you've not been able to tie that link, to connect the dot.
Now, both the state and the defense are due back in court later this month on April 27th. At the courthouse, I'm Kemal Eppinger.
Finally, within the week leading up to the trial, the father was presented a plea deal that would allow him to serve only 2 years in prison versus the 40 years he's facing if this goes to trial. He rejected this plea deal. That's a big reject. So he must have a good reason.
Was it a case of child neglect or bad parenting? Was it punishment or simply protection? Defense attorney Priya Murad and the state will have a complex case in front of them on Friday to prove whether or not Tim Ferriter should be found guilty on charges of child abuse and false imprisonment. Both will be tried separately.
You swear to tell the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. In a pretrial hearing Tuesday, Tim Ferriter rejected a plea deal by the state, 24 months and 5 years probation. He now faces 35 years and possibly more. His attorney contends the child was a, quote, medically complex child, and the alleged box was, quote, a room used for monitoring. The defense intends to show a pattern of troubled behavior, which at the onset of the case showed dangerous and disturbing propensities, including attachment disorders. DCF removed the child and 3 other children from the home. It is now up to a jury to decide the fate of the parents.
The judge presiding over this case is the Honorable Howard Coates, Jr., who is part of the 15th Judicial Circuit in Palm Beach County, Florida, Division 5. The morning before trial started, Judge Coates heard the defense and prosecution, further arguments over what evidence should and should not be admitted. There is quite a bit of disagreement over what images should and should not be portrayed and what can be derived from the images that are being shown, as well as the videos. So here is the morning before trial and Judge Coates ruling on the issue.
Opening statement, the state objects to it. And it's a 5-minute video that includes a lot of photographs that the state montages, videos that the state doesn't believe will come into evidence. They're not relevant, they're prejudicial. And so we would object to them being shown to the jury at this time, prior to Your Honor making an evidentiary ruling.
All right.
I can show it to the court.
What's the basis, and how does it not amount to just good character type evidence?
So, Judge,
that's the primary concern I had coming out of the hearing yesterday, when you told me that you had 200 photos.
That's not, I understand that, Your Honor, but this video is only 5 minutes. I would say the second half of it includes ring videos that were disclosed by the state in discovery. So the beginning of the video includes some family photos and videos. And the reason it doesn't amount to good character evidence is there's an intent element here.
I understand that, but it doesn't mean you can put in evidence of good character to negate an intent element of a criminal offense. So
Judge, it is kind of different here because the issue is parenting, right? And they're trying to say that there's a time frame in which, and they're going to show limited videos of the relationship between parents and children that say this is abusive because of the way in which that this particular conduct.
Where's your client?
I think Mr. Wahed is getting him, Judge. I apologize.
All right, we should have him present for this argument. All right, so the court knows that Mr. Ferriter is now present. All right, so go ahead, Ms. Moran.
So, Judge, it's a short video. I don't believe that it's cumulative. I'm happy to show it to the court. It's primarily things from after Ronan was 10 years old, and it's only for opening. And again, I would ask the court to consider that the second half of it is just ring videos that are disclosed in discovery. So the fact that the state is able to play videos of him in a room or doing things that they deem abusive, the only way for us to counter that is to offer context as to what the rest of his life was like. Otherwise, it's just them yelling at him or putting him in a room, right? Like any parent, if anyone's worst parenting hits were recorded on video, I think everyone would seem abusive. So we have to be able to offer some level of context. I understand that the court can sort of tailor that so that it's not cumulative.
The most pious individual in the world could be a great, upstanding, moral individual, but if that individual, despite his piety or great character, commits a single act that results in a criminal offense, my understanding of the law is that evidence of piety and great character doesn't come in to negate the criminal offense that has occurred. So how is this different from that?
Because that piety is irrelevant to, if someone shoots somebody and murders them, the fact that they served food at the food bank is irrelevant. In this case, we are being asked to make, or the jury is being asked to make a decision about whether or not a parent had the intent to commit abuse and whether or not that abuse was already committed. So it's not just good character evidence. It ties into the facts because this relationship is relevant. It's like,
So let me give you some context, and I'll give you an opportunity to make your argument. Let's say you want to show pictures. Haven't seen them yet, but you want to show pictures of the defendant and his son, him taking his son to a basketball game or soccer game, him playing catch with his son, doing father-son types of things. How is that relevant to the issue of whether he's guilty or has committed the criminal offenses of which he's alleged to have committed in this case?
because as the jury said yesterday during our discussion of criminal intent, there's no, if Mr. Ferriter does not testify, right, the only way to determine his intent is his conduct. And if the only person that's permitted to admit conduct is the state, then we have no ability to negate what that intent is and show, no, this is a family with ups and downs, and there were issues that this child was facing. But that doesn't mean he was unloved or uncared for.
But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
It does matter.
How does it matter? It doesn't matter whether he's loved or unloved. If the criminal offense is false, let's deal with false imprisonment, for instance. If the criminal offense is false imprisonment, and the allegations are that he placed his son in improper confinement that amounted to alleged false imprisonment, doesn't matter whether he loved his son or not. That's irrelevant. It's did he stick his son in a facility or structure that amounts to, under the law, false imprisonment? That's the issue, isn't it?
So I think that's different for the false imprisonment charge than it is the aggravated and the neglect. So the false imprisonment charge is sort of a different, I mean, I still think there's an intent element there, but I understand why there's a little bit more clarity as to what constitutes false imprisonment. But what constitutes child abuse is different, because there's a lot of stuff that parents are allowed to do that does not constitute child abuse, unlike false imprisonment where there's a lot more clarity. And there is a maliciousness element. The state spent an extensive amount of time talking to the jury about what does maliciousness mean to you. If all they see are the state's videos, that's what they're gonna think.
All right.
I would like the court to view the video. It's 5 minutes. I need to put it in the record anyway. And if the court is not inclined to permit me to play any of it, I would ask that the court permit me to play the videos that were disclosed in discovery by the state during the course of time.
Disclosed, counsel, disclosed in discovery is not the barometer or the measure by which you're allowed to present it to the jury. There's a lot of stuff disclosed during discovery that is not admissible at the trial. So let me make this simple. If there are things in this video that are not coming into evidence at trial, I'm not going to allow you to show it. But do you believe you're going to be able to overcome the objection? Because I assume there's going to be an objection to these things coming into trial. And if you're going to show them evidence that I know that's not going to come in during the trial, I'm not going to allow it in opening statements.
So my position, based on the argument that I'm presenting to the court, is that it should be admitted. And so I think the court needs to view it and make a pretrial ruling. And I know that delays the jury. It could either now or bring the jury, do the instructions, state do their opening, and then give them a short break. Because it's a 5-minute video. I'm happy to email it to Your Honor's judicial assistant so the court can even watch it in the back. And then perhaps there are portions of the video that the court would allow. Because I understand what the court is saying, that just because, of course, something's in discovery, we depose on all sorts of stuff and it's speculative, it doesn't come into evidence. However, in this particular situation, there's a 4-week time period, that's it, within which the state is saying that certain conduct happened that amounts to aggravated child abuse, child neglect, and false imprisonment. And so there are other videos during the course of that show that there is malicious intent. So if we do not have the ability within reason, and I understand if the court makes a ruling that too much of it is cumulative, but if we don't have any shot at explaining, then
So your back to my hypothetical example. Your client takes his son to the basketball game on a Saturday afternoon. Great day, they're laughing, smiling, having a great old time, brings him back home and puts him in, allegedly, in this structure, locks the key from the outside. I'm concerned that you're kind of going down a path of saying that taking the child to the game and doing the father-son thing somehow justifies or explains putting the son allegedly in the cage, and that I can't connect those dots.
no, Judge, that's not the defense.
All right, so what is the relevancy of it then?
Well, first, I think that the issue is the court's understanding of the room and how it was utilized. So first and foremost, the defense's position is that it was utilized primarily for supervision. In his own deposition, Ronan said it wasn't locked all the time. This is mainly in the evenings when he couldn't be supervised. And we're still working on putting it all together, but that will be presented in the defense case in chief based on the videos provided in discovery, and I do think that's relevant. So how can a jury make a determination about the relationship between a parent and a child without some context as to what the relation? It's like a self-defense case. You have to have context in order to explain conduct.
And they got to do it based on admissible evidence. If there's not admissible evidence, then they may not be able to make that connection. But it still boils down to both sides having to work with what is admissible in this case. And that's my job as the judge, to ensure that what comes in is admissible and what's presented to them is admissible. And I have significant concerns that what may be in this video is not admissible. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to spend any more time on this. Email it to my chambers right now. I'll review it, and then I'll come back out and announce a ruling. The court's going to be in recess for 10 minutes for me to review this video.
Mr. Wahed, he has an argument to
add.
add.
I just want to add one thing, Judge. First,
All right, so let me make sure that we have a proper protocol here going forward. One spokesman per side per issue. So if you take the lead, Ms. Murad, I'm only going to hear from you. I have no problem with Mr. Wahed taking the lead, and I'll hear only from him. But I don't want to have this double teaming, and so you know my procedure. I will go ahead and hear your comment at this point because I didn't advise you of that prior to this instance. But going forward, I'm only going to hear from one side, one spokesman for each issue. That means you can alternate whatever issues you want to discuss. All right, go ahead, Mr. Wahed.
thank you, Judge. First, in terms of admissible evidence, you definitely have RF who's going to be able to speak to those photographs. So that evidence would be admissible at the very least through RF. So he's aware of those things. He was asked about some of those things in deposition. He admits those things. These pictures would be admissible through RF. Second, at least most of them. Second, because at some point he was too young. So obviously the ones where he's too young, he won't recall. Second, our defense, which is the affirmative parental defense, there's an issue of reasonableness, of reasonable parenting. And that requires context. It requires the jury to understand, and just for the court's information, what's going to come out through both a state expert and a defense expert is the escalating history of the family dealing with RF and his mental health issues throughout the course of his life. And it's important because the state is essentially putting forth that he is in this room all of the time, or the majority of the time when he's not in school. And that has to be rebutted. This evidence rebuts that. It shows
Well, I'm not sure I agree with you. I haven't said yet that I would knock out photos of perhaps the parents and RF going to a psychiatrist office, for instance, or going to a mental health facility. But that would be something that might be admissible, and it might be relevant to the response and the efforts of the parents to deal with the issues that they're having with their child. I get that. I get the strategy. But just simply showing a picture of the parents and the children having a good time at some point, to me, is not relevant to the specific issues that I have to decide in this case from an evidentiary standpoint. I'm not going to hear any further argument. Go ahead and email it to my chambers, and I will take a recess for 10 minutes. When I come back, I'll announce a ruling. All right, court's in recess.
Court's in brief recess.
The proposed video of the defense in camera. Court sustains the objection of the state. All right, anything else I need to address prior to the opening statements?
And that brings us up to opening statements in this very disturbing case. As I said before, I am going to trim up the daily court proceedings to get out all of the dead space, all of the white noise while they're having bench conferences, all of the jury shuffling in and out where you're staring at the ceiling or the seal, and then I'm going to post it. It's probably going to be the following day, so you're going to be a day behind. If you want to watch it live, you're more than welcome to. But if you want to watch another trial during the day, I'm going to post this in the evening after most of the daily trials are done so that people are able to watch both if they'd like. Okay, everybody, have a great day. Okay, so that was the background information. That was the arguments they had right before the trial started, and then they went straight into opening statements. I edited out the bench conferences. There were a couple during the defense's opening statement. One of them was pretty long, but you'll hear when they start it. So here we go.
This time, is the state ready to present its opening arguments? All right, you may proceed, Ms. Coakley.
Morning, everyone. Over the course of this week, you're going to hear a lot and get to know a lot about the life of Ronan Ferriter. He goes by Ty, and today he is 16 years old. But this case starts, and really the focus of what his life was like is how his life was in end of December 2021 and January of 2022 when he was just 14 years old. This morning, you're going to learn that on January 28th, 2022, he ran away from home. He lived in Jupiter, Florida at that time with his parents, the defendant, Tim Ferriter, and his mom, Tracy Ferriter. You're going to hear that Ronan was adopted as a child, as a small child, a toddler age from Vietnam, and he had lived with the Ferriters since that time. He was the second of their 4 children. He has an older sister named Fiona, who you're also going to get to hear from at this during this trial, a younger sister named Nola, and a much younger little brother named Pierce, who was about 3 years old when all of this happened. And in January of 2022, he was a student at Independence Middle School and 14 years old. You're going to hear on the 28th, he ran away from home. He was reported missing to the Jupiter Police Department, and that's where this case starts. You're going to hear from Jupiter Police Department officers who are going to tell you that they took the report of a missing child and that he didn't come home on the next day on the 29th, and he also still was not located on the 30th. They went back to the Ferriter residence to find out if there was new information. Had he come home? Was there any leads? The day he left was a Friday, still wasn't there on Saturday, and on Sunday, Detective Sharp from the Jupiter Police Department went into the Ferriter home with Tracy Ferriter. You're going to hear it's at that point that for the very first time he learned about how Ronan was living, about what his living situation was like at home with his parents. He's going to tell you that he was shown the house, and the first thing that stood out to him was that the child who they were looking for didn't have a place to sleep in the main house. There wasn't a bedroom for him, there weren't his items of clothes, there weren't his toys inside of the house. Instead, there was a structure, a small room box-like structure that was constructed in the garage that didn't have any windows. It had a box spring and a mattress, a bucket in the corner, and a desk. You're going to hear that at that point, the child still wasn't found, and so Detective Sharp left and continued the investigation. And the next day, which is Monday, January 31st, Ronan shows up at his school. And there he is made secure, made safe by the Jupiter Police Department, And that's when the criminal investigation really starts, after they had the opportunity to speak to him. You're going to hear that as part of the investigation, during that initial walkthrough of the room, Detective Sharp realized that that small cell-like room had a ring camera in the corner to observe the occupant of the room. And so as part of his investigation, he served a search warrant to the Ring Corporation to see if they had maintained any videos. And you're going to get the opportunity to see and hear that evidence that was returned from the Ring Corporation, because that ring camera captured moment after moment of Ronan's life in that room. You're going to hear over and over and over again that door locking and unlocking, because the evidence is going to show that that room was not a room that Ronan could come and go from as he pleased. He was locked inside from the outside over and over again. You're also going to see that he did not have the ability to control things like the lights in that room, that the only way that those lights could be controlled was outside the room. And so you're going to see him sitting in the dark in a windowless room for hours at a time. And we're not just talking from 10 p.m. till 7 o'clock in the morning overnight. You're going to see that even during the day, there are times in which his parents, the defendant and his wife, would turn off that light and leave their 14-year-old son locked in a room in the dark, alone, isolated. You're also going to get to observe and hear the anger and the derision, the physical altercations that this defendant has with his child on the Ring camera, physical intimidation and the threats of violence. You're also going to see Ronan having to use that bucket, having to pee in the bucket, because for hours overnight, he did not have access or the opportunity to go to the bathroom. And the only option for him was to pee in the bucket. And then you're going to see the next morning when that occurred, that this defendant would tell him, clean out the bucket, make sure the neighbors don't see you doing that. Because this treatment, his life, was kind of a secret thing. And you're going to hear that it's not the state's case, and it's not the evidence in this case, that he was kept in there 24 hours a day. He went to school. There were times where he was outside of the room with his family. There was times where he was shoveling shells for his father for hours at a time. But for long periods of time, for mass majority of this child's life, in that period in Jupiter, Florida, he's in that room, isolated, alone, without autonomy, without privacy, without stimulation, sometimes with only a single book to read over and over again. As part of the evidence in this case, you're going to hear that the defendants are charged with that 4-week period, that 4 to 6 week period, because the family moved to Jupiter, Florida in December of 2021. Mid-December, kind of a week or two before Christmas, and this all happens at the end of January. So we're talking about 6 weeks when they are in Palm Beach County, Florida. And so that's the charged time period. That's the criminal conduct that we're talking about. But the state expects that you're going to hear evidence about Ronan's life before the family moved to Florida, when they lived in Arizona. We expect that you're going to hear testimony about a very similar, nearly identical room that the family constructed for him in Arizona, in which he had been residing in since he was 11 years old. You're going to hear that that room had no access to a bathroom, no control of the lights, no freedom of movement, that he was recorded, and that he was locked in from the outside with only a bucket to go to the bathroom. The charges in this case are aggravated child abuse, child neglect, and false imprisonment. And at the end of this trial, Judge Coates is going to read you instructions about what the law is for child abuse in the state of Florida. And you're going to hear that there's child abuse and there's aggravated child abuse. Aggravated child abuse occurs when a defendant engages in malicious punishment of a child, willful torture, or the willful caging of a child. And those are in the alternative, meaning it could be any of them. And child abuse in the state of Florida means the intentional act that causes physical or mental harm or conduct that is likely to cause physical or mental harm. So that doesn't mean that there actually has to be harm. It's just that it's likely to cause harm, that they engaged in an act that is likely to harm a child. And to help you understand what the harm is here and how this conduct is criminal, the state is going to call a Dr. Wade Meyer. Dr. Meyer is a child psychiatrist. He's affiliated with Brown University, and he's going to tell you the impact that this kind of treatment has on a child, that it's humiliating, isolating, cruel, and malicious. He's going to tell you that it will cause harm to any child, but it will certainly cause harm. That harm could be exacerbated if that child already has a behavioral issue or has trauma. And you're going to hear about some of that in this case. It's true, and Ronan will admit that there are times that he did not follow the rules, that he made mistakes, and that he did things that his parents punished him for. But you're going to hear that in no circumstance is this a protective punishment for any child. And in particular, for a child who may have issues with trauma or a behavioral issue, that this is the worst possible thing that a parent could do. It is the exact opposite of any recommended treatment, of any therapeutic purpose, or anything that would lead to productive response from a child. Instead, Dr. Myers would tell you that it would increase the likelihood of behavioral issues. Because when you isolate a child like this, when you humiliate them, when you basically put them in solitary confinement for large portions of the day, that has a negative mental impact. At the end of this trial, Judge Coates will instruct you on the law, but I want to be very clear on a couple of things. The state here does not have to prove that every moment of its day they were committing a crime against Ronan Ferriter. We don't have to prove that there are no moments when he was let out of the room. That's not the state's case, and that's not what Dr. Myers is going to say is necessary to cause harm. We also don't have to prove, and you're not going to hear, that there's any kind of legal defense or special standard for a child that has behavioral issues. That if
Overruled.
the law, you're going to hear from Judge Coates. The law you're going to hear from Judge Coates is not going to be that there's any kind of affirmative defense or that there's any different standard just because a child has behavioral issues. We're here today because of the actions of Tim Ferriter towards his son. They were ongoing, they were intentional, and they were criminal. And so at the end of this trial, after you have heard all of the evidence, all of the testimony and the law from Judge Coates, we're going to ask you for the only verdict that is supported by the evidence and the law. And that's a verdict of guilty as charged. Thank you.
Okay, that was the prosecution's opening, and now this is the defense's opening statement.
Responsibility to make tough choices. Tough choices to protect their child, tough choices to protect their other children, and tough choices to protect the community. And that is what Tim Ferriter did in this case. He was faced with an impossible situation. And he made tough choices to protect Ronan, or Ty, is what we will call him throughout this trial, from himself from the other children in his home, and from the community. You only have to make one determination in this case, and that is whether or not Tim Ferriter had the criminal intent necessary. That's it. Did he or did he not have the criminal intent? And that will be your guiding question throughout this case. This case is not about whether or not Tim Ferriter made the right choice, because I will be the first to tell you, the defense will be the first to tell you that he did not. But what it is about is the difficulty of parenting, right? Because bad parenting does not make somebody a criminal. Bad parenting does not mean that a person should be charged with a crime. It makes them human. It makes them a parent who is trying to figure out, when faced with a child, as you'll hear throughout the trial, who has consistent and escalating behavioral issues, how to handle them. You will learn more throughout the trial, but I want to try in these next few minutes to share with you what that relationship looked like. In 2009, Tim Ferriter and his wife Tracy took the very long flight to Vietnam to adopt their first son, Ty. At that point, him and his wife Tracy had spent some time in the Honduras, and so they were really motivated to adopt. And the first child that they adopted, Fiona, who you will hear from in this trial, is Chinese. And after they had Fiona, they were really excited to adopt again. And they wanted her to have a sibling that was culturally close to her. While they were waiting for Ty to get the news that they were going to be able to adopt from Vietnam, they had their first biological child, Nola. And within just a few years, they go from this young couple to a little family. They have 3 little babies. And this is really the first iteration of that family before Pierce comes along several years later. Tim and Tracy love these children.
Objection, Your Honor.
Overruled.
They did everything that they could when they were young. Karate, softball, soccer. Ty was in track. He loved Legos. They got him science posters and galaxies. So he had a periodic table of elements and stuff about galaxies in his room because those were his interests. But what we don't know is how our stories will be written. You don't know where our children are going to end up. And as parents, all you can do is try to raise children who make good choices, who are going to be productive members of the community, and hope that that works. And unfortunately for Ronan, it just couldn't. Later in this week, you will hear from a seasoned psychologist, Dr. Sheila Rappa. Dr. Rappa is well respected as a forensic psychologist. She's routinely hired by the state attorney's office. She is routinely court appointed to conduct psychological evaluations in this county, to give opinions about psychiatric or psychological expertise. And her specific experience is working with children like Ty. And so that's what makes her uniquely qualified to speak with you about the records that she's reviewed and the patterns of behavior that she noticed. Ty underwent a neurological examination. And what it shows, and as Dr. Rappa will explain to you, is that neuropsychological evaluation showed elevated levels of a lack of inhibition and clinically elevated levels of a lack of emotional regulation. And as Dr. Rappa will explain to you, these elevated levels are associated with early life brain development, usually when someone's a baby, pre-verbal, or even in utero. And that makes sense because Dr. Rappa reviewed records, early childhood records of Ty. And what they show is that he had malnourishment, he was not well taken care of when he was dropped off at the orphanage and while he was there. We can't know his exact medical history because his biological mother just left him at the orphanage, but the records that Dr. Rappa has reviewed over the course of Ty's life, in addition to some of the depositions taken in this case, other records, they will show you that, for very much lack of a better term, Ty is wired this way. It is a function of brain development. And it's why the Ferriters continued to see patterns of behavior that would not stop. I want to take you through some of those patterns. Since he was a kid, Ronan had aggressive outbursts and tantrums.
Overruled for purposes of opening.
His parents regularly received emails of him fighting at school, punching other kids, using profanity. Tim and Tracy moved Ronan. Well, let me start with this. He was at a school with his sister Nola, where he pretended that a teacher asked him to make an announcement in class. So he was in a different class. He goes into Nola's class and says, "Oh, the teacher asked me to make an announcement." He has his sister stand up and humiliates her in front of the entire class, saying that she's a horrible person. And it was so disturbing to the teacher who was present, who you'll hear from throughout this trial, that she had to report it. Tim and Tracy moved Ronan to an accelerated private school in hopes that the challenging work would engage him. It was sort of a math and science type school, so they thought that that would help him stop. It did not. He stood up in class at that school and asked if the Holocaust was a good thing. He was accused of telling a student that they should get aborted. He got up in class and said that immigrants are more likely to be drug dealers. He brought a screwdriver to class and was waving it in someone's face. He stole another student's laptop, hacked into it, and looked up women getting run over by trains.
Sustained.
And he pretended to be a tutor to a friend of his.
Sustained.
And that happened while he was in
Counsel
the marriage.
approach.
Ty also pretended to be a tutor to one of his friends and then stole her father's credit card and utilized it.
Overruled as to that.
Thank you, Judge. This is just a handful of the consistent and escalating behaviors Ronan continued to engage in. And he himself will tell you, as the state said in their opening, that he knows that things are wrong, and he continues to do them. He knows that there are consequences, and he continues to do them. And all this time, Tim and Tracy are racking their brains trying to figure out what will change Ronan's behaviors, because they have an entire family here, right? These kids go to school, they have their own activities, they have a toddler at one point. They have to be able to get through the day-to-day of just being an adult and having a family, be able to send their child to school safely, knowing that other children will remain safe. So they try to get him into activities to kind of take out his energy. And when they see that's not working, they do counseling. They give him the medications that he's prescribed. They try to help him sleep at night because he keeps wandering the house. They cut sugar from his diet on the recommendation of a pediatrician, that maybe that'll help his behavior, and that'll make him less impulsive. This family is going from place to place to place, from appointment to appointment, trying to figure out how to get this child actual help, how to get a diagnosis, and how to get medication that will change his behavior. And as we discussed in voir dire together, what they found was a revolving door of doctors and therapists, and no one was able to offer them the help that they needed. You will see that Tim tried to curtail Ronan's behavior when nothing else worked, and there will be some videos of that. It's not always going to look pretty, just as it doesn't look pretty in real life when a parent gets mad at their kid. Particularly a child And you must remember when you see the videos, particularly a child who for years and years and years is continuing to engage in these behaviors, who will not stop. In 2019, while living in Havasu, Arizona, Tracy and Tim had their last and youngest child, Pierce. And at that point, they are fearful. Ty, Nola, and Fiona are a little bit older. They're about 10, 11 years old. And Pierce is coming in as an infant. And at this point, Ronan had been hurting other kids at school. He had been engaging in dangerous behaviors. He's walking around at night. And they did not know if an infant could be safe with Ronan in the house. And that is when they made the decision, while he lived inside their home in Arizona, this is not in the garage, this is in a house, to put a lock on his door. And that was not for the purpose of keeping him locked inside at all times. It was not for the purpose of even punishment. It was for the purpose of monitoring him when they couldn't. Because unfortunately, they're in a situation where they cannot leave this child unattended. There has to be somebody constantly watching him, and they cannot do that as two working adults. You'll hear that Ronan or Ty participated in activities, he went to school, you'll see videos of him around the house, and he will tell you himself that the door was not always locked. But they did use it when he couldn't be supervised. Once Pierce was born, they needed a baby room. So they built a room in the Arizona house in the garage for Ty. It had a bed, it had a desk, it had Legos. You'll hear from witnesses who actually saw that room. And Ronan showed it to them. Ty took them in and said, hey, look at my room, and showed them all the toys that he had and the books that he had in the room in Arizona. So right before Christmas of 2021, that's when we get to sort of the time relevant in this case. The Ferriters moved back to Jupiter, where they lived many, many years ago when the kids were young. And they decided to build a similar room for Ronan. It had the bed, desk, books, and toys. You'll see videos of him in his room. He's reading. He's talking to his friends. He has Legos there. He is not allowed to have technology in his room alone because that's not something that they felt was safe, but he had other types of activities. He did have like a school Chromebook that was provided by the school. You'll see him FaceTiming with a friend of his. He had posters up on the wall that he, when he got angry, ripped down himself. That's why the walls will look bare. Both the room in Arizona and the one in Florida had one very big design flaw, and that is that it did not include a bathroom. And this means that Ronan, at night when he was in the room and couldn't be supervised, had to use a bucket for the bathroom if he needed to use the bathroom. During the day, he was permitted to move about the house freely, and he could utilize the bathroom in the house itself. And I'm going to be very honest with you, you're going to see him use the bathroom in that bucket a handful of times over this 4 to 5 week period. He's a kid, so he's not waking up and using the bathroom all the time like probably all of us are. And so he uses it a few times, and it's not going to look pretty. But what you have to remember throughout this case, right, is that this was not some big secret life like the state is presenting. These people went to doctors. They went to therapists. The schools were emailing them back and forth about Ronan's behavior. They had family members and friends see the room in Arizona. In Florida, they were only here for about 4 weeks right before Christmas, and then school started. So this is not some sort of secret life that they had for Ronan. Everybody knew that Ty had behavioral issues. Everybody knew that Tim and Tracy were trying to get a diagnosis so that he could get appropriate help, and it never happened. As you review the evidence in this case, you have to remember that the issue at hand is not whether or not Tim Ferriter is a great dad. It is not whether Tim Ferriter did what you would have done, and it's not even if Tim Ferriter did the right thing, because our own expert, Dr. Rappa, will say that he did not. and that those actions could have been damaging to the child. That does not make his actions a crime. The singular question in this case is whether or not there was criminal intent. Because what Tim did not do is have his child arrested, not one time. What he did not do is undergo a failed adoption proceeding where you essentially return a child back to the Department of Children and Families.
Sustained.
He paid,
Sustained.
okay.
No need to approach. I sustain the objection.
He paid for private schools so that so that Ty could have activities that he was engaged in. But he had to make tough choices to protect his son, to protect the other kids in his home, and to protect the community from a child who was already showing, a screwdriver in class, hitting other kids. He had to do that. And though he didn't handle it correctly, his intentions were not criminal. Dr. Rappa will testify, based on her extensive experience and review of the records, that what she sees in this case is not malicious. That what she sees in this case is actually very common for parents with children who have such extensive behavioral issues that are hard to sort of diagnose and pinpoint. At the end of this trial, I'm going to come back up here after what I expect to be about a week of evidence. And I'm going to ask that you really listen to what Ty says, even in his own testimony. And that you consider what it's like, and that you consider how a parent
Sustained.
how a parent has to act in these situations. The difficulty that Tim Ferriter experienced over and over and over again. The help that he attempted to give this child over and over and over again. I'm going to ask that you find him out.
All right, thank you, Ms. Murad.
Okay. So I put a poll up to get an idea of what everybody thinks prior to hearing all the evidence. I'm going to take it down now, and then we're going to compare it at the end of the trial to see what exactly, how your opinion changed as this case went on. So the next thing we're going to see is the first witness, and his name is Officer Ryan Kenech with the Jupiter Police Department.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Please state your name for the record, spelling your last name.
Officer Ryan Kenech, Kolenich.
Where do you work?
The town of Jupiter.
How long have you worked there?
Approximately 8.5 years.
And what's your role?
Patrol.
Okay, patrol what?
Patrol officer.
Okay. How long have you been doing that?
The entirety of my 8.5 years.
Okay. And do you have any prior law enforcement experience?
I do.
Where?
As a patrol officer in the state of Ohio.
How long did you do that for?
Approximately 5 years.
Now, as your role now, what kind of training and experience do you have?
I am a field training officer, and I'm on the emergency field force team.
And what do you do as a field training officer?
I oversee and guide new officers.
Now, every year, do you have to do any continuing education?
Yes, every year I complete my required annual training with the police department.
Now, I'm going to turn your attention to January 28th of 2022. Do you remember that day?
I do.
And were you working that day?
Yes.
What was your capacity that day?
Road patrol.
Now, where did you first respond?
For, like, the address?
Yes.
We went to an address in Egret Landing, I believe.
Is that in Jupiter, Florida?
Yes.
In Palm Beach County?
It is.
Now, what were you responding in reference to?
A missing juvenile.
Who did you make contact with when you first arrived?
The missing juvenile's mother.
And what was her name?
I believe it was Tracy.
Okay. Now, at this point when you arrive, are you with anybody else?
Myself, I was with my training officer. Officer Picard, but no, just Tracy herself.
And you guys arrived there via patrol car?
Correct.
When you first get there, what do you do?
Made contact with the mother at the home.
And where did you make contact with her?
At the front door.
Did you ever go inside?
No.
So you had a conversation with her outside that house?
Yes.
What was the point of having that conversation with her?
Fact-finding, information gathering, so I could relay the information that I was given to responding officers to check for the missing juvenile.
Now, did she ever give a description of that juvenile?
Overruled.
Did she give you a description?
Yes, I believe so, yes.
And what was done with that description?
We relay that information over the air to officers that are checking the area for the missing juvenile, and it's later typically used for like a BOLO of some nature to put out to other surrounding agencies.
Okay, so you mentioned BOLO. What is BOLO?
It's just like a memo or a transmission to be on the lookout for a certain item, whether it be a person, vehicle, property of some nature that's sent to officers not only on my shift that I work with and other surrounding agencies.
Now, when you spoke to the mother, how is her demeanor like?
You'd have to ask me. I'm not sure what kind of answer you're looking for. Just she wanted to locate her child, I guess. I'm not sure as far as the demeanor. I don't know.
Okay. Did you ever make contact before Mr. Ferriter? Now, after speaking with to any other location?
I personally did not. Other officers did.
Okay. And do you know where the other officers had gone?
Yeah, they went to check surrounding areas. I believe that she relayed to me as far as like a local church, local parks, and just major thoroughfares throughout the town.
So at the end of January 28th, 2022, did you ever locate that child?
I did not.
1 minute, Your Honor. Your Honor, I have no further questions.
All right, cross-examination, Mr. Wahid.
Morning.
It was Tracy Ferriter who called the police, correct?
Correct.
And your the efforts that JPD made thereafter were essentially looking for a runaway child, correct?
I can't speak to thereafter. I'm not. I don't know what happened thereafter. As far as just on scene with myself is all I can. That's all I can explain to you.
Correct. So, based upon the information you received the day you met with Tracy Ferriter, you essentially began a search for a child, correct?
Yes.
Who had run away from home, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you were provided with possible places he may have gone, correct?
Yes.
And you mentioned a church, correct?
Yes.
You also mentioned local parks, correct?
Yes.
And you weren't involved with actually searching any of those locations yourself, correct?
Correct.
Okay. One moment. Nothing else. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wahid. Any redirect, Ms. Black? No redirect, Your Honor. All right, is this witness excused? Yes. All right, sir, that concludes your testimony. You may step down. Thank you for being here.
Good morning, I'm well. How are you?
Could you please state your name for the record, spelling your last name?
Sally Collins, Collins.
Where do you currently work?
I work for a law firm in Port St. Lucie, Sinclair Law Offices.
What do you do there?
I'm a bookkeeper.
Now, back in January of 2022, did you have a different occupation?
I did.
Where did you work then?
I was a police officer for the Jupiter Police Department.
How long were you a police officer?
19 and a half years.
Now, during those 19 and a half years, did you stay in the same role?
Yes.
And what was
most
that?
of the time. For about 6 years, I did recruiting and background investigation, new hire officers. For the rest of my time, I was road patrol.
Now, did you have any prior law enforcement experience?
No, ma'am.
And what kind of training and experience did you have as a road patrol officer?
I did the initial 6-month academy at Palm Beach Community. It was Palm Beach Community College now. It's Palm Beach State College. And after that, I did our in-house training. I took different interviewing techniques and all those kind of basic courses that we do throughout our careers, in-house and at other locations.
So I'm going to turn your attention to January 29th of 2022.
Yes, ma'am.
Were you working that day?
Yes, ma'am.
And in what capacity were you working?
I was working road patrol, and I was assigned to District 2.
And was anybody with you?
Officer Chad Smith was also assigned to District 2.
Now, at any point during that day, did you become aware about a missing juvenile investigation? Would looking at your report refresh your recollection?
Yeah, would you mind if I looked at my report? And you said January 29th?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I gotta get readers. On the 29th, my sergeant had said that there had been a report of a missing juvenile taken the night prior, so I guess the 28th?
Yes.
And so on the 29th, I believe he said something to the effect of, it's a teenager that went missing, reported by the school as missing. If you could follow up with the parents and see if he's returned home, you might want to wait until later in the day to see if he's gone to school and has come home after school, something like that.
Okay. So at this point, it is January 29th of 2022.
Correct.
Okay. And after receiving this information, what do you do with that?
I'm referring to my notes here on the call. I initiated a call. Normally what we do when we're called for service is there's a call generated. If it's something that we decide we're going to go and do on our own, we can pull an event number and then tag that to the location and put our notes in that, what we did.
So at this point, who are you trying to make contact with?
I was trying to make contact with either Mr. or Mrs. Ferriter.
Okay. And did you eventually make contact with either of them?
I made contact with Tracy.
Okay.
And my note says she advised that Rowan has not yet returned, and she would call the police department with any updates. And my note says, but she didn't seem overly concerned as he's done this before.
Now, is it typical for you to follow up when children are missing?
Yes.
Okay. And how often would you do something like that?
Road patrol is sometimes very responsive. And so if you're going call to call to call, it might wait a few hours, or it might be something that you accomplish first thing when you get to work is to follow up with something.
Did you ever hear back from Ms. Ferriter on the 29th?
The next day, when I reported for duty, my shift started at 5:30 in the morning.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, but we're now talking about January 30th of 2022.
Correct.
Okay, so what did you do that day?
That was a Saturday, and so my sergeant had said, hey, night shift didn't report that he came back, so at some point, can you go to the house or check in with them again and see what the status is, and see whether this child is returned.
Okay, so at that point, what do you do?
So I spoke with Officer Smith, who is routinely assigned to District 2, and I said, hey, I want to go out to the house and see if we can get a hold of them because it's being a Saturday morning. Maybe he's returned, maybe they've heard from him, something. Let's just go to the house.
Now, when you went to the house, did you notice any cars in the driveway?
I don't believe there were any cars in the driveway. We looked at the property. It didn't look like anybody was home. It was quiet. We did knock at the door several times. Again, it was quiet, didn't appear to be anybody home. There was a chain link fence that ran down the side of the property. We kind of looked over that to see if we could see any movement, see anybody home. It's not unusual that people keep their cars in their garage, and so we didn't know if anybody was home. Repeated knocking, walking around the house, nobody came out.
Okay, so at that point, you notice that nobody's answering the door. What is your next step?
So again, I said, well, let's call her. because I spoke to her yesterday. Let me call her again and see if we find anything out, see if he's returned home, or, maybe they just haven't told us yet that he's back.
And did she let you know that he had not returned home?
Yeah, so I placed a call to her, and I actually, my body-worn camera had been activated while we were out there. And because, sorry, this is a little backstory, but we don't get assigned cell phones, so we have to use our personal cell phones. I don't like to use my personal cell phone to call people I don't know, because then they'd have my number. So I called dispatch and said, can you put me on a recorded line, and can you record the conversation? Can you patch me through to her? So I gave dispatch her phone number, they called her, and she answered that phone call.
Okay. Now, without going into details of the actual phone call with her, did she let you know that he had not been found yet?
That's correct.
Okay. And did, after you were at that residence, after you spoke with her, what else did you do?
So while I spoke with her, it seemed to be a normal conversation. I was asking, would they be home? Where were they? Are they coming home soon? She indicated that her husband was with one daughter at some sporting events in Jupiter, and that she was with their daughter at Jupiter High School for band practice or something to do with the band, and that it wasn't convenient for them to come home.
Now, did you ever at any point go to the house later that day?
No.
Your Honor, what minute?
Granted.
No further questions.
All right, Quells?
Man, you said that you were told that the husband was in Florida at the baseball game on that day. This is on the 29th?
The 30th.
The 30th.
Yeah, which was a Saturday.
Do you know subsequently that that's incorrect, that he was in fact in Ireland during this entire time?
No.
Okay, so that was information that you noted it somewhere? Did you write that down?
It's written down that, made contact with Tracy, and she advised nobody is home. One daughter is at Jupiter High School with band, and one at JCC with sports.
Okay, so nowhere in there does it say that Tim Ferriter is with any of the children in Florida on that day, correct? It does not say that.
It does not say that.
Okay, so it's possible you're incorrect when you testified that Tim Ferriter was in fact with a child that day in Florida, correct?
Could you repeat that?
It's very possible, because you said on direct that Tim Ferriter was told by you, sorry, Tracy Ferriter told you that Tim Ferriter was with one of the children that day at a softball game. Mm-hmm. And your notes don't reflect that. In fact, do they? There's nothing in your notes that say that.
Softball, it said sports. I also haven't had a chance, I retired from the Jupiter Police Department in February, a month after this event. I haven't had a chance to review my body-worn camera, so I can't tell you as I sit here whether she specifically said she's at the game with her father or not. But at no point did anybody say to me he's in Ireland, he's not in the country.
Is it very possible that Tracy Ferriter did not tell you that Tim Ferriter was with any of the children that day?
Without listening to my BWC and reading what's here, it's possible.
May I take a quick look at that note you're looking at?
You can approach.
Tell me where on here you were reading from.
I was reading from one daughter at JHS with band and one at JCC with sports.
Okay. So, just so I'm clear.
Counsel, you need to, if you're going to speak, you need you have to be at a mic or you won't get picked up.
I also need my reading glasses. One back, please. Sign for beige.
Yes, sir.
Nowhere on this report, though, does it say that Tim Ferriter is with the child. It says where one child is and where the other child is. It doesn't say the father is with any of the children.
You're correct.
Okay. So when you're saying that Tracy Ferriter is telling you that Tim Ferriter is with one of the children, that isn't in your notes.
You're correct.
Okay. I have no other questions.
Any redirect? Is this witness excused? All right, ma'am, that concludes your testimony. You may step down. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, sir.
In order to preserve the record with respect to the video that was requested by the defense in the opening statement, I'd like you to take that video, put it on a thumb drive, have it marked as Defendant's Exhibit 1 for ID purposes, so that it can be properly made a part of the record, because we didn't do that at the opening, but let's make sure that's taken care of.
We also have some objections to the defense. So I'm going to show them the video we're going to play through this witness, but the defense has indicated that there's a video that they intend to cross-examine him on, and the state has an objection to it.
Okay, so we didn't address it in by way of a motion in limine, so I'm going to address it in real time as it comes up at the appropriate time in the cross-examination at this point.
They just let us know about it. So.
Okay, no, I understand. So I'll handle that the same as I would any other evidentiary objection. All right, Mark, have we figured that out?
Well, so ours, we addressed and you reserved, Your Honor, as to, this is the time when we would like to put in the evidence of the actions of Tracy Ferriter changing the room. So this witness that's about to testify, we have an objection separately that wasn't addressed before because we weren't aware of it, to the videos that they want to use during cross-examination of this witness.
Okay.
In the motion in limine, though, we did address two of the videos that the state would like to enter here. So this witness is going to testify that he entered the Ferriter's home prior to the child and took a look at the room. And that's when the room was first discovered. This is the lead detective, Detective Sharp. When we did the search warrant of the Ring camera, it was revealed that immediately before Detective Sharp is led into the room and sees the room, that Tracy Ferriter goes into the room, takes out some of the sheets, and then also takes out the bucket.
All right, and this is the state's video.
These are the state's videos. They're from the Ring camera, but yes, they're the state's videos.
Okay.
And so we think that this is necessary evidence in order to show why when subsequent, like here when he views the room, it's different. So he's not aware of the bucket or any of that because of her actions. There's no statements. And then subsequent to that, there's a search warrant about 8 days later, and the room is substantially different at this time. The defense alleged that they don't want it to be attributed to Tim that these actions happen. We're not eliciting any statements. It's actions that are caught on video. Beyond that, they're charged as co-defendants and they're principals to each other's actions. So if this was a bank robbery and Tracy Ferriter, during her escape, took actions that we had video of, those would be admissible in the state proving our case, because they're charged because of the principal theory. They're charged as principals to each other as co-defendants, and they're responsible for each other's actions that are in furtherance of the crime. Right. And so there's three videos total that we're going to play. The first two are...
Let me stop you there. This is the argument that I heard in limine, and this is one that I said I'd reserve until time of trial. You have any additional argument other than what was made in limine at this point?
Not any additional argument to that. One video doesn't involve, so there's three videos total. I believe the objection is only to two of them, which are Tracy taking the actions to change the room before law enforcement gets in. We're also going to show...
And you're not playing the audio of you just...
There's no audio to those two. There's a third video where Detective Sharp goes in and she kind of shows him the room and he looks around and you can see him like noticing as part of his investigation some of the aspects. She does say some things during that. We are going to play that one without audio.
Okay, all right. So let me hear Mr. Wahid. You're standing there, so I assume you're going to make the argument on this issue. Okay.
So while I wasn't at the motion in limine, I'm looking at it. So the issue, first of all, the state's argument that it's an act in furtherance, it's actually not. So under co-conspirator law, when the crime is done, anything subsequent to the crime, which is, cleaning up or hiding the crime or all of that, is not considered part of a crime. Therefore, it's not in furtherance, according to federal case law at the very least. And I'm not quite sure
Do you have any
Is
state case law that supports that position?
I haven't looked at that, so I can look that up, but this is something I do know.
Well, now's the time. If you have it, I need it now because I'm going to be making a ruling imminently.
All right, well, I'll need a moment then, Judge.
Well, you're not going to get it. You got to make it now, and I'm going to make a ruling because we are in the middle of trial and they need to proceed.
The court remembers the state advised that they may not be playing the video, so we just found out.
I understand, but everybody's been aware of this issue and should come well prepared to argue any evidentiary or legal points with any citation to case law that exists. If you don't have it for me now, day late and a dollar short. I need to make a ruling, so go ahead, Mr. Waheed. And you certainly can rely on your federal case law that you've got. I mean, I'm not saying I'll discount that altogether, but I certainly like to hear state case law when it comes to state evidentiary issues.
Of course, understood. And then the other argument, Judge, here is that there is zero evidence that Mr. Ferriter had any idea about any of this that was going on, in that while it's not in evidence, at some point it might be in evidence, is that he wasn't even in the country at the time. And the court severed this case for a reason, is that you don't want the jury to take admissions of possible consciousness of guilt of one party and impute them on the other. I think that really muddies up the water here, and quite frankly, I think it counters why the court agreed to sever in the first place. So I don't know that this is, in terms of admissibility, those are my arguments. Obviously, I also think there's a 403 argument, which is this is substantially more prejudicial than it is of any sort of probative nature of Mr. Ferriter's culpability.
Brief rebuttal, Ms. Coakley, and focus on your argument again with the principal point that you're making.
Right, they're charged as principals to each other, so their culpability is intertwined as principals. So the actions that were taken in furtherance of the criminal act of one can be attributable to the other.
And you have 3 videos, 2 of them of which have no audio, and a third one you're playing without audio.
Yes, the first 2 are just her removing things from the room. She removes some blankets, and then she removes the bucket, and then immediately after that, chronologically, is when the detective is shown the room. That's when they have that one. I don't believe that they're objecting to, and he looks around, sees the room. There's talking. We're not going to play the audio for that one. The first 2 don't have audio, I don't believe.
All right, the defense objection to the playing of the 3 requested state videos is overruled, so they will be permitted to be played during the testimony of this witness. Now, is there another video that I need to address that the defense
The
is going to be
defense
playing?
has let us know that they're going to try and bring in some body cam. Depending on what they bring in, I'll let Ms. Black make a contemporaneous objection. We may not. We can.
Body cam of the,
It's not of this witness. It's a body cam from the search warrant.
and of the structure?
Of the house, yeah. And so I think it might include, so I don't know what they're intending to try and offer. Depending on that, we can make an objection at that time. The second one they have indicated to me is that when the child was found at Independence Middle School, he was initially placed in handcuffs and taken into police custody, like they caught him. They want to put in body cam of the child in handcuffs. The state would object to that. It's not relevant, it's prejudicial, and it can cause a confusion of the issues.
Okay,
They have indicated that the reason for that is they want to show how he looked at that time. Immediately after he was caught, he was taken to the Jupiter Police Department. There was a recorded interview where he's on video, and there's also photographs of how he appeared at that time taken for that purpose. There's no reason that they have to show him in handcuffs other than to insinuate that there's some kind of criminal conduct there, which Your Honor has already ruled was not admissible.
Okay, Mr. Waheed, are you going to be attempting to put this in through this witness? Or is it for some subsequent?
We got the other issue still, Judge, so yes. I will answer your question, then I'll come back to this. I'm sorry, Judge, say that again?
Are you going to be using the video that she is referring to in cross-examination of this witness?
Yes.
All right, so let me hear your argument, and then I'll make a ruling.
Sure. So the body-worn camera of the search warrant, Detective Sharp was present. He's in the video. It does show the layout of the house. It also shows the condition of the house at the time of essentially when this offense all happens, which is, I think the search warrant's executed.
I let the judge know we make a contemporaneous objection to that. We're talking about the one of Ronan being arrested.
Okay. So for the other one, there's allegations that the state is making throughout, that they will be making throughout, that Ronan was malnourished, that he was essentially deprived food. And you see him on this video. This is only a couple of days after he's run away from the Ferriter's home. This is the first time you see him. And
All right, so focus on the real issue here. It's not that's not the real issue. The real issue that she's raising is whether it's appropriate to show the jurors the minor being handcuffed by Jupiter Police Department, and whether that's unduly prejudicial or probative here.
Well, first of all, the condition of the child is what you're going to see there first. And this is the first time we will encounter the child on video after he runs away. And secondly, it wasn't like there's no allegation in this case that they were arresting him for some crime. They secured him. I don't know why they did what they did, but they secured him and they put him in a car. But that's the first time. That's part of the story of when that's where they get him.
Well, let me just kind of analogize. I don't allow my defendants to come in front of a jury and be handcuffed because of the negative perception that jurors have when they see somebody coming in to the courtroom being handcuffed. And I have a similar concern that if they see a witness being handcuffed, that might have an adverse effect on their determining the credibility or not of that witness. So that's where I'm coming from. So address that concern and why I shouldn't be concerned about that aspect of it. Because obviously, the defendants, we protect them to make sure that they're not handcuffed in front of the jurors precisely to avoid the negative implications of what being handcuffed means.
Understood. Although there have been several videos of interviews of my clients that have come into evidence where they are cuffed to a table. But putting that aside for the moment, in this situation, I don't think there's anything.
I don't think in my courtroom, but at least hopefully not, because I know we typically try to avoid that at all costs. But go ahead.
I don't think there's anything here that is prejudicial to the state at all. I don't think it's not that there is no allegation that we're making that in that moment he was being arrested for some crime.
Well, let me ask you this. Does the entirety of the video show the minor in cuffs, or is there only a part of it that shows it?
There's a part of it. He walks, I don't know how many seconds or minutes or what it goes. I don't have the timestamp at hand, but he walks down the hall, he walks in, you see him, then the police officer stops him and then says something to him, and then they put the cuffs on him.
Okay, all right, brief rebuttal, and then I'm going to rule.
It's prejudicial on its face. I wouldn't be able to show the defendants being arrested in this case. There's video of that. They can achieve the same ends. There's video of him literally 15 minutes later at the Jupiter Police Department where he's not handcuffed. And then there's pictures that were taken to document his body. In addition, there's been no allegation, nor will be, that he was malnourished. The defendants were incredibly controlling and limiting about his access to food. That's fundamentally different than an accusation of malnourishment, which is not the case here.
Okay, so my ruling is as follows. The state's objection is sustained in part, overruled in part. It is sustained as to any portions of the video showing the minor in handcuffs. It is overruled as to the remaining part of the video that does not depict the minor to be in handcuffs. So as far as your side, Mr. Wahid, that means you can play the video. You just got to excise out any part showing that the minor is in handcuffs.
Well, I think it shows an apprehension where they chase him and grab him and then put him in.
I didn't even see that.
Okay, I don't know. That's what you haven't shown. I haven't seen it.
The video I was trying to show you earlier, it's just him walking down the hallway, and he's in the lobby of the school, and then he talks to some officer, I assume a school resource person, and then they put the cuffs on him. And it might keep going.
Well, what you're describing, I have no problem with except for the cuffs part that I've already ruled on. But if there is a video of them running the minor down and chasing him and apprehending him, I'm not going to allow that to be played.
I have no intention of playing.
Okay. All right. So
for the record, can I just put a case on the record?
You can put it on the record. I'm not going to change my ruling at this point, but go ahead.
Well, Wells v. State, it's a first district case. We were doing this in a hurry. And it points out that, and in that particular case, it was a homicide case, and that the real issue there was that the questioning, which was after the crime, is not in furtherance of the conspiracy. The crime had already taken place. He's being charged here with aggravated child abuse, that there was no ongoing version of that by the time Detective Sharp has this interaction with Tracy Ferriter. It's therefore not in furtherance of any conspiracy.
Do you have any case law that says that in a co-defendant situation where they're charged as principals to each other, that consciousness of guilt conduct is not something that can be imputed to one of the other principals? Because to me, that's where this becomes potentially relevant, and why I'm ruling the way I am is because if the spouse is showing consciousness of guilt by removing the bucket from the room, and consciousness of guilt can be shown as, that can be the evidence that the state submits, where you have a principal situation, why would that not be relevant, even under the case you just cited?
Well, the issue goes towards a principal to the crime, and the crime charged here is the actual child abuse charge. If it would be different if you were...
Well, child abuse, let's not forget false imprisonment and child neglect. And so even on the issue of false imprisonment, it seems to me you've got a much tougher lift to convince me that the consciousness of guilt of one principal isn't imputed or can be used against the other principal. Am I missing something?
Well, I think what the video, as my recollection goes, again, I came into the case late, so if someone correct me if I'm wrong on this, but my recollection is that it is essentially removing some sheets and the bucket. It's not removing the lock from the door, which would be the issue of the false imprisonment. A bucket in a room is not part of the false imprisonment charge. The confinement is the false imprisonment.
Not sure I agree with that, but I understand the point you're making. I'm just not sure I agree with it. I mean, the bucket could be used by the state as potential evidence of the false imprisonment because it kept him from leaving the room and he had to relieve himself in the bucket. So I can see where they can easily tie that in. Any other argument you wish to make, Mr. Waid, for the record?
Not unless Ms. Murad comes up with a case very quickly, no.
Okay. All right, so my ruling remains the same. Thank you for making the argument, and you've put your case on the record. Mr. Waid, thank you. All right, all sides ready to proceed now with the continuation of the state's case?
Yes, we're all set. We did meet during lunch about the next witness, but we are obviously going to need to take a break.
Yeah, we'll take a break. Well, you'll let me know when you're ready for me to take a recess so that we can get the IT set up for the in-camera testimony. And that's the next witness, right? Not this witness, but the next witness. Okay, all right. So Ms. Coakley, you ready?
Okay, so we're about halfway through the witnesses. I think there's two more. The next one is going to be the detective on the case. And then following that is going to be one of the Ferriter's children. So it's pretty interesting. Lots going on there. Lots of legal arguments that could be broken down, but I'm not going to talk. I'm just going to let you watch. So here we go.
All right, Ms. Black, you may proceed.
Good afternoon, Detective. Please state your name, spelling your last name for the record.
Yes, my name is Andrew Sharp, S-H-A-R-P.
Where do you work?
I work for the Jupiter Police Department.
How long have you been there?
I've been at the Jupiter Police Department approximately 17 years.
And what's your title there?
I'm a detective.
How long have you been a detective?
6 years.
What'd you do before that?
Before I was a detective, I had various roles throughout the agency. I was a field training officer. I also worked on a special response team. I had various other roles.
Now, what kind of training and experience do you have as a detective?
As a detective, I have several hours in advanced interviews and interrogations. I also have several hours of training in regards to child abuse investigations, as well as just general investigations.
So at the Jupiter Police Department, do you guys have any specific units, or are you just an overall detective?
We have an overall criminal investigations division.
And as part of that, do you also do any continuing education every year?
Yes, we do.
Now, I'm going to turn your attention to January 30th of 2022. Were you working that day?
Yes, I was.
Okay, and in what capacity were you working?
Yes, so I was the on-call detective for the Jupiter Police Department. So I technically wasn't at work, but I was on call for the day.
On that day, did you get assigned a case?
Yes, I did.
Okay, and what was that?
That day, I was assigned by our Criminal Investigations Division Sergeant a missing persons case.
How do you typically get assigned a case?
So typically, what happens when you're on call for the day, anything that comes in that would involve further investigation, it's assigned to a detective. And if you're the detective that's on call, it's your job to handle those investigations.
Once you got that phone call, where did you respond to?
The first thing I did was I responded to the Jupiter Police Department, and I made contact with the Criminal Investigations Division Sergeant.
And at that time, are you notified about what's been done so far in the investigation?
Yes, I was made apprised of exactly what took place, that a few nights prior, there was a juvenile that was reported missing, and then there was some other circumstances that led the sergeant to assign it to a detective.
Now, what time did you arrive to the police department?
It was that evening, I would say, without referring directly to my report, probably around 6 or 7 p.m.
And after going to the police department, where's your next stop?
The next stop was at the Ferriter residence.
Did you make contact with anyone from the household prior to going to the residence?
Yes, the Criminal Investigations Division Sergeant and I made a call to the mother in the case, Mrs. Ferriter, just to make sure that she was present at the house before we went.
Now, when you get to the house, what do you do first?
The first thing we did was we attempted to make contact with anyone at the residence. We knocked on the door and we were greeted by Mrs. Ferriter.
Where did you end up speaking to her?
The entire conversation took place outside of the residence, kind of in the front porch area. Right, there's just like a brick paver walkway. It was right on that area.
Did you notice anything about how she was acting when you first made contact with her?
Yes, so immediately I wanted to go inside the residence to make sure.
Overruled as to that question and response. You may continue with your answer, sir. You just can't say what someone said.
Sure.
What you did.
Thank you, Your Honor. So immediately I wanted to go inside the residence because I wanted to make sure, find any evidence of where this individual may be and to make sure that his safety and well-being was taken care of. So I attempted to do so. However, Mrs. Ferriter was apprehensive.
Overruled.
And would not initially allow us inside.
Overruled.
You can finish answering the question.
Thank you. We stood outside probably, I think the entirety of my body camera worn footage was about 52 minutes, and I believe 45 minutes was standing outside of the residence, waiting and asking repeatedly to go inside.
Okay. So you said that she was apprehensive about you going inside, right?
That's correct.
And the rest of the time you spent 45 minutes speaking to her outside?
That's correct.
Did you do anything to make her feel more comfortable at that time?
Absolutely. I reassured her over and over that I was not there to investigate her. I was not there for any other reason but the safety and well-being of her son. I said I did not care if there was any kind of other illegal activity going on in the house. I wasn't worried about that. My sole priority was for the missing juvenile.
When you first responded to the house, were you alone?
I was not. I was in the presence of the Criminal Investigation Division Sergeant and Officer Jurak.
Did you eventually go inside the house?
Yes, I did.
Were you the only one that went inside the house?
Yes, I was.
So when you first walk into the house, kind of describe what did you see?
Sure, absolutely. When I first entered the residence, there was a small credenza right alongside the wall there. This credenza, there was an object on it, but that was the only item. Mrs. Ferriter then directed me into a room directly inside the residence. I believe it was to the right. She purported that both of her sons stayed in that room.
Sustained is that the statement. I just refrain from saying what Mrs. Ferriter actually said. You can say what she did, what you observed, but not what she said.
So
Thank you, Your Honor.
you indicated that there was a room that you were shown by Ms. Ferriter?
That's correct.
Okay. What did you see in that room?
Inside that room, I only saw objects belonging to a young child. I believe there was a sign that said Pierce in the room. There was also a crib and other objects, me to believe that that was the only child that occupied that room.
And you indicated that there was a sign of the name Pierce. Is there a child that the Ferriters have named Pierce?
That there is.
Did you notice anything else about that room?
Inside that room, there was also a small makeshift area that appeared as though there was a blanket and what appeared to be a pillow laying on the floor, but it was there kind of haphazardly. It didn't appear as anyone had slept there. It was just there, placed.
Where is the next part of the house that you go to?
After looking in that room, I was directed towards near the Florida room. There was an area with a small desk. Mrs. Ferriter led me to believe that the children would do homework in this area.
Overall,
You can answer the question.
So there was a small area for homework, it appeared. There were some writings that were told to me that belonged to Ronan.
sustained us to that.
Without going into what was said, what was on the writing,
No.
or anything like that, what was the next place in the house that you went to?
The next place I went to was the enclosure in question,
Where was that enclosure found?
inside the garage of the residence.
And when you first went in there, what did you do?
When I first walked, so the enclosure is through the kitchen and into the garage. When I first walked through the kitchen and into the garage, I noticed that the door appeared to have a deadbolt, and there appeared to be a light switch on the exterior of the room outside to the left of that door. I then walked in, and I observed a box spring and a mattress with what appeared to be some sheets, and there was also a small desk, a little bit smaller than this, that appeared to have some children's books on them. So I stood inside the room and I looked around for clues as to, Ronan, where he may have gone, et cetera.
So I know while you were sitting down, you were motioning kind of like the length of what the witness stand was.
Yes,
Now, how long were you in that room for?
I was in the room less than a minute. I was inside the residence.
Now, after you finished viewing the room, where did you go next?
After I first walked into the room, I recalled that I could see something out of the corner of my eye, but I wasn't sure exactly what it was. So when I walked back out of the room, I asked Mrs. Ferriter if I could go back in the room. She allowed me to go back in, and when I went back in, that was when I saw the Ring camera that was in the corner of the room.
Now, after you saw that Ring camera, what was your next step in the investigation?
The next step, we were directed outside of the residence. I spoke to Mrs. Ferriter for several minutes outside of the residence, and then I directed other units that were working that evening to check in the area of some of the previous places that Mrs. Ferriter advised her son may have gone. So I know I checked the skate park. I directed other officers to check and other areas that were within the surrounding area of where the residence was.
Now, I'm going to turn your attention to January 31st of 2022. Were you working that day?
That day I was.
Okay, and again, what was your role that day?
That day I was a detective, and my role was to continue the investigation in regards to the missing juvenile.
Did you become aware that the missing juvenile had been found?
That morning I was made aware that the juvenile was located at the Independence Middle School.
And where did you respond to?
I responded to Independence Middle School.
Subsequent to that, did you meet with the juvenile?
I did.
And where did you meet with him?
So the juvenile, I met with him initially on scene, and then he was brought back to the Jupiter Police Department so I can conduct my initial fact-finding interview with him.
Okay, and you said fact-finding. What is that?
Just an initial interview, just to find out exactly what I'm dealing with, exactly what the facts of the case may be, and find out exactly if there are any allegations of criminal behavior, et cetera.
How was he acting when you met with him at the police department?
He was very soft-spoken, very timid and shy, and appeared to be withdrawn, and was very nervous.
Did you eventually get a statement from him that day?
I did.
Now, turning your attention to February 1st of 2022, again, were you working that day?
I was.
And did you make contact with the siblings in the case?
I did.
Okay, and who are they?
Both made contact with both daughters, and Fiona Ferriter. I apologize for misstating her name.
And did you take them anywhere?
Yes, they were brought to the Child Protection Team office in West Palm Beach.
And what is the Child Protection Team office?
The Child Protection Team is an office that's holds forensic interviewers, and they do our forensic interviews for our cases. So a more detailed interview than my initial fact-finding interview that took place.
So both Nola and Fiona were interviewed there.
That's correct.
And subsequent to that, on February 4th of 2022, was Ronan interviewed there as well.
Yes, he was.
Now, after all of these interviews were done, what did you do as part of your investigation?
As part of my investigation, I served a search warrant, and I served and executed a search warrant on Ring, which was the camera that was inside of the room, and I began perusing the video and through that.
So I know you kind of are describing the camera, but what is specifically Ring?
Sure. So Ring.com, I'm not sure if you're familiar with, but Ring is a service that provides video doorbells. They also provide surveillance equipment and other things. And they are a cloud-based storage server. So anytime a video or anything is recorded through their service, it's uploaded and stored on their cloud server.
So you went ahead and executed that warrant for Ring?
That's correct.
And what did you get back from Ring?
Several thousands of videos, surveillance videos.
How many videos would you say there were?
Approximately 21,000.
And did you review each of those videos?
I reviewed a majority of those videos. I reviewed all of the videos in relation to the enclosure in reference to this case.
So when you say you reviewed the videos to the enclosure, were there other Ring cameras around the house?
That's correct.
Where were they?
There was, I believe, a front door camera, and I believe there was also another camera that captured an area in the backyard.
Besides the Ring search warrant, were there any other search warrants executed?
Yes.
What were those?
On February 8th, we executed a search warrant on the residence.
Your Honor, I'm showing opposing counsel was previously marked as State Exhibit 1A.
Mark, can you make sure the microphone, the hand mic is at the podium so they can use it? Just cut it off until they're ready to use it.
I love that this judge is all about making sure they're on the
First,
mic.
I want you to restate what you did. You were walking away, and I want to remind all counsel, you are being recorded, so you've got to be close to a mic. I'll even give you the portable mic that you can carry with you. Make sure you have a microphone with you, or you're at the microphones when you're speaking. So restate what you just said, because I didn't hear you, and I doubt it got picked up on recording.
On the record, I was asking, Your Honor, if I could approach the defense counsel to show them State's Exhibit 1A through C.
1A through T? C. C is in charge.
May I approach the witness?
You may.
I don't know if this is on.
There's a green light when it's on. Just press it.
I am now showing the witness what's been marked as State's Exhibit 1A through C, if you want to just go over those.
Thank you.
And then look up when you're done with them.
Sure. Okay.
And do you recognize those?
I do.
How do you recognize those?
These were our photos that were taken by my crime scene investigator that I directed to take.
And are they a fair and accurate depiction of what the house looked like on February 8th, 2022, when the search warrant was executed?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would enter into evidence State's Exhibit 1A through C.
Any objection? No objection. All right, so the court receives and accepts State's Exhibits 1A through C as in Charlie in evidence without objection.
Now, you stated on direct that you had your crime scene investigator take pictures.
That's correct.
Okay. You don't take the pictures yourself?
I do not.
And why not?
I'm not trained in taking photographs forensically, and our crime scene investigators take hours of training in regards to taking photographs, documenting crime scenes, etc.
Your Honor, at this time, permission to publish 1AC.
Granted. Okay, you're not using an Elmo? How are you doing it? Okay, all right, that'll be fine. Yes, it needs to be moved up. And right about there, I don't want you to obscure my view of the defense table. Okay. All right, and so members of the jury, if we need to move it closer, I obviously will move it as close as it needs to be for you to be able to see it clearly. But if you're able to see it clearly where it is, that's fine. But if you're not, give me the thumbs up or thumbs down, and we'll move it closer. Okay, good enough. All right, we'll leave it where it is then.
So for the record, I am showing states 1C. What is this a picture of?
That is a picture of the open front door of the Ferriter residence.
And when you were speaking earlier about when you spoke to Ms. Ferriter, is that where you had been standing?
That's correct.
I'm now showing you 1A. And what is this a picture of?
That is a photo of the overall residence of the Ferriters.
Okay, and if we could go to 1B. What is this a picture of?
That is a picture of the exterior door from the garage to the exterior of the residence.
Now, when you first walk into the house, where do you go?
The foyer, it's like an open area that leads, not really a hallway, but there's a small wall, and then to the right, there's a bedroom. So in the first foyer.
Your Honor, at this time, I'm showing opposing counsel what's been previously marked as... Oh, I'm sorry.
Making it tricky for you.
You are. States 2AB.
2A through D or E?
A through B.
B, okay.
May I approach the witness?
You may.
I'm showing you what's been previously marked as States Exhibit 2AB for identification purposes. You can look at it. Do you recognize this?
I do.
And how do you recognize it?
Again, this is a photograph of the foyer of the Ferriter residence, and it was taken at my direction, and is also in the area that I was standing and was brought into that first day.
Is it a fair and accurate depiction of where you had gone on February 8th, 2022 in the residence?
Yes, it doesn't look exactly the same, but it is a fair and accurate depiction of the residence.
Okay, Your Honor, at this time, the state would introduce States Exhibit 2AB.
Any objection?
It looks like on what day? I didn't.
February 8th of 2022, when they executed the search.
That's what it looks like on that day.
Any objection? All right, so court receives and accepts States Exhibits 2A through B as in Bravo. Any objection?
And Your Honor, at this time, may the state publish?
Granted.
And just for the record, it is photos of the entrance of the house. For the record, it is States Exhibit 2A. What is this?
That is the photo you just showed me of the foyer of the Ferriter residence.
Okay. And you stated that although this was how you saw it on February 8th of 2022, you said it was different.
That's correct.
How was it different?
So on January 30th, the first day that I was there, that credenza did not have those photos placed on it. Neither was that sign with whatever phrase that is. That wasn't present either.
Now publishing States 2B. And what is this a picture of?
That is just another angle of the same foyer.
Now, when I was asking you questions, you had indicated that there was a bedroom to the right when you first walked in.
That's correct.
Okay. Your Honor, I'm showing opposing counsel what's been previously marked as States Exhibit 3A through C.
C or D?
C. I'm sorry.
It's my hearing.
May I approach the witness?
You may.
I'm showing you what's been previously marked as State's Exhibit 3A through C if you want to look through them, and then just look up. Do you recognize those photos?
I do.
How do you recognize them?
Those are photos of the first room, Pierce's room, inside the Ferriter residence that were taken at my direction.
And are these photos accurate depiction of how you saw the room on February 8th, 2022?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would introduce into evidence State's Exhibit 3A through C.
Any objection from the defense? No objection. Court receives and accepts State's Exhibits 3A through C as in Charlie in evidence without objection.
Permission to publish?
Granted.
I'm showing you State's Exhibit 3A. What is that a picture of?
That is a picture of the youngest Ferriter's room, Pierce's room, inside the Ferriter residence.
And on January 30th, did you see the bed like that?
No, in that room, there was no bed. There was only a crib and other items for a small child.
Okay. Turning to State's Exhibit C, 3C. And is that the crib that you had indicated?
That's correct.
Your Honor, at this time, I'm showing opposing counsel what's been previously marked as State's Exhibit 4A through D. Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
I'm showing you what's been previously marked as State's Exhibit 4A through D. Just go ahead and look at them.
Thank you.
Do you recognize those?
I do.
How do you recognize those?
Those are photographs of the same room, but this time the bed in that bedroom has the sheets removed, and they were photos that I directed our CSI to take.
Are they a fair and accurate depiction of how the room was on February 8th, 2022?
Yes, they are.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would enter into evidence State's Exhibit 4A through D.
Any objection? No. Court receives and accepts State's Exhibits 4A through D as in Delta in evidence without objection.
Permission to publish?
Granted.
I'm showing you State's Exhibit 4A. What is that a picture of?
That is a photograph of the youngest Ferriter room, which shows a bed without the sheets and a crib, and as well as some small children's toys.
Why were the sheets taken off?
When I observed the bed in that room, I recognized the sheets from these Ring videos, and I believe that that bed was the same bed that was previously in the room, or I'm sorry, in the enclosure that was inside the garage. So I directed my CSIs to remove the sheets and to photograph the bed.
Okay. Now publishing State's Exhibit 4B. And what is that?
That is a view of the interior of the room from the exterior.
And now publishing 4C. And what is that?
That's another photo of inside the room of the mattress and box spring.
Now publishing 4D. What is that?
That is a photo of the same room with the dresser for Pierce, as well as the sheets, et cetera, on the floor, and the mattress and box spring, and the crib, as well as some other children's toys.
Did you go to any of the other bedrooms in the house?
I did.
Did you go to any of the other siblings' bedrooms?
I did.
Your Honor, at this time, I'm showing opposing counsel what's been previously marked as State's Exhibit 5A through D.
Okay.
May I approach the witness?
You may.
I'm showing you what's been previously marked as State's Exhibit 5A through D. Do you recognize those?
I do.
And how do you recognize them?
Those are photos of one of the siblings' rooms that I directed our CSI to take photos of.
And are they a fair and accurate depiction of how the room looked like on February 8th, 2022?
Yes, they are.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would enter into evidence States Exhibit 5A through D.
Any objection? Court receives and accepts States Exhibits 5A through D as in Delta in evidence without objection.
Permission to publish?
Granted.
Publishing 5A. What is this a picture of?
That is a photograph of one of the daughters of the Ferriters' rooms.
And publishing 5B. What is that a picture of?
That is another angle of the same room.
5C. What is that?
That appears to be the closet of the same room.
And 5D.
That's another angle of the same room.
Now, after going into that room, did you go anywhere else?
Yes, I went into the other sibling room.
Did you at any point go into a bathroom?
Yes, I did.
Your Honor, I'm showing opposing counsel what's been previously marked as States Exhibit 6.
Okay.
May I approach the witness?
You may.
I'm showing you what's been previously marked as States Exhibit 6. Do you recognize this?
Yes, I do.
How do you recognize it?
That is a photograph of the bathroom, of the spare bathroom inside the Ferriters' residence.
Is it a fair and accurate depiction of how the bathroom looked like on February 8th, 2022?
That it is.
Your Honor, this time the state would enter into evidence States Exhibit 6.
Any objection? No. Court receives and accepts States Exhibit 6 in evidence without objection.
Permission to publish?
Granted.
Now, what is this a picture of?
That is the same photo you just showed me, which is the bathroom of the spare bedroom, the spare bathroom inside of the Ferriter residence.
Where was it located in the residence?
I believe it was in between the siblings' rooms.
Your Honor, at this time, I'm showing opposing counsel what's been previously marked as States Exhibit 7A through F. May I approach the witness?
You may.
I'm showing you what's been previously marked as States Exhibit 7A through F, if you just want to take a moment to look at it. Do you recognize these photos?
I do.
How do you recognize them?
Those are photos of the other sibling room that I directed my CSI to take.
And are they a fair and accurate depiction of what the room looked like on February 8th, 2022?
That they are.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would enter into evidence States Exhibit 7A through F.
Any objection? Court receives and accepts States Exhibit A through F as in Frank in evidence without objection.
Permission to publish?
Granted.
Now publishing States 7A. What is this? Or that's actually 7C. What is this a picture of?
That is a photograph of one of the siblings' beds inside of the Ferriter residence.
Okay, now publishing States Exhibit 7B. What is that a picture of?
That is another angle of a bedroom inside of the Ferriter residence.
Now, after going to that bedroom, was there anywhere else in the house that you went?
Yes.
Where did you go?
The master bedroom?
Okay. And I know during our direct examination, you indicated that there was a Florida room.
That's correct.
Did you go there also?
That's correct.
Your Honor, at this time, I'm showing opposing counsel what's been previously marked as States Exhibit 8A through B. May I approach the witness?
You may.
I'm now showing you what's been previously marked as State's Exhibit A, 8A through B. Do you recognize those?
I do.
How do you recognize them?
Those are photographs of the, of the Florida room that I directed my CSI to take.
Okay. And is it a fair and accurate depiction of what the Florida room looked like on February 8th, 2022?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would enter into evidence State's Exhibit A through 8AB.
Any objection? No. Court receives and accepts State's Exhibit 8A through B as in Baker in evidence without objection.
Permission to publish?
Granted.
Now showing you 8A. What is that a picture of?
That is a photograph of the Florida room inside the Ferriter residence.
Now, did you have your CSI take pictures of the garage?
I did.
Your Honor, I'm showing opposing counsel what has been previously marked as State's Exhibit 9. May I approach the witness?
You may.
I am showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 9. Do you recognize this?
I do.
How do you recognize it?
This is a photograph of the garage from the exterior of the residence with the garage door open that I directed my CSI to take.
Is it a fair and accurate depiction of what the garage looked like on February 8th, 2022?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would introduce into evidence State's Exhibit 9.
Any objection? Court receives and accepts State's Exhibit 9 in evidence without objection.
Permission to publish?
Granted.
So you stated this was a photo of the garage
That's correct.
from the exterior.
That's correct.
Okay, and where is that enclosure that you had been speaking about?
If you are looking at that photograph, behind the tan shelves, behind those green boxes, you'll see a white wall. Those two white walls that you see there, those are some of the walls of the enclosure.
Now, did your CSI take pictures of inside of the garage?
Yes, she did.
Your Honor, I'm showing opposing counsel what's been previously marked as State's Exhibit 10A through D.
Okay.
May I approach the witness?
You may.
I'm showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 10A through D, if you just want to look through them. Do you recognize them?
I do.
And what are these?
These are photographs of the interior of the garage that I directed my CSI to take, which included photographs of an orange Home Depot bucket.
And are they a fair and accurate depiction of what the inside of the garage looked like on February 8th, 2022?
That they are.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would enter into evidence State's Exhibit 10A through D.
Any objection? Court receives and accepts State's Exhibit 10A through D as in Delta in evidence without objection.
Permission to publish?
Granted.
Now publishing State's Exhibit 10A. What is this a picture of?
That is a photograph of the orange Home Depot bucket the victim had to use to urinate and defecate in.
Okay, and how do you know that?
That meets the depiction of the Home Depot bucket that was shown inside of the surveillance videos, as well as what was told to me by the victim.
Now publishing 10B. What is this a picture of?
That is another angle of the interior of the garage that shows to the door which leads to the exterior of the residence, with the enclosure there in view on the right of that photograph.
Okay, now going to 10C. What is this a picture of?
That is a photograph of the shelving units that were inside the garage. As you can see on one of the lower shelving units, that's where the Home Depot bucket was placed when we arrived there on February 8th.
Your Honor, I'm showing opposing counsel what's been previously marked as State's Exhibit 11A through E.
Okay.
I'm showing you what's been previously marked as State's Exhibit 11A through E. Do you recognize those photos?
I do.
How do you recognize them?
Those are photos of the exterior of the enclosure I directed my CSI to take.
And are they a fair and accurate depiction of what the outside of the enclosure looked like on February 8th, 2022?
That they are.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would enter into evidence State's Exhibit 11A through E.
Any objection? Court receives and accepts State's Exhibits 11A through E as an epsilon in evidence without objection.
Permission to publish?
Granted.
Publishing State's 11A. What is that a picture of?
That is a picture of the exterior of the enclosure inside the garage of the Ferriter residence.
And what about for 11B?
That is another photograph of a different angle of the enclosure.
Now, if we can go to 11E.
That's
11C. What? 11D. What is that a picture of?
That is a photograph of myself holding up the letter C to indicate that that was room C for the search warrant. And that is a photograph of the exterior of the enclosure inside the Ferriter garage with the door to the enclosure leaning up against the enclosure.
You also indicated that photos of the room were taken, or
That's
the enclosure.
correct. That's correct.
Your Honor, at this time, I'm showing opposing counsel what's been marked as State's Exhibit 12A through C. Permission to approach the witness?
Granted.
I'm marked State's Exhibit 12A through C.
I do.
How do you recognize them?
Those are photos of the interior of the enclosure that I directed our CSI to take.
Are they a fair depiction of what the interior of the structure looked like on February 8th, 2022?
That they are.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would introduce into evidence State's Exhibit 12A through C.
Any objection? Court receives and accepts State's Exhibit 12A through C as in Charlie in evidence without objection.
Permission to publish?
Granted.
Now, publishing 12A. What is that a picture of?
That is a photo of the interior of the enclosure.
And at that point, there was nothing in it.
That's correct. The only item that was in it was that window air conditioning unit.
Now, on January 30th of 2022, when you first responded to the house, what was inside that enclosure?
Inside that enclosure on that day was a desk about the size of this witness stand, as well as the box spring and mattress.
And when you're referring to the box spring and mattress, is that the same one that was in Pierce's room in the photos?
That's correct.
Overruled.
How did you know that it was the same box spring?
I reviewed the Ring surveillance photos. In some of the Ring surveillance photos, Ronan did not have any sheets on the bed. As you could see in the previous photos that were brought by state, you could see a very pronounced tag that was on the mattress. That tag is the same tag that I saw on the 8th. That was the same tag that I saw in several of the Ring surveillance videos. So with those, I believe that that mattress is the same mattress that was inside of that room.
Now, publishing State's 11B, what is that a picture of?
That is another angle of that interior enclosure.
And 11C, or 12C, I apologize.
That is another angle of the interior of the enclosure. This time you can highlight there the door of that enclosure is off and laying against the wall.
On January 30th of 2022, when you first went to the residence, was the door like that?
The door was not like that. The door was on the door frame. hinged and utilized appropriately with the exterior deadbolt lock on the outside.
Your Honor, I'm approaching opposing counsel, showing them States Exhibit 13A through C. May I approach the witness?
You may.
I am showing you what's been previously marked as States Exhibit 13A through C, if you want to go through those. Do you recognize those photos?
I do.
How do you recognize them?
Those are photos of the door of the enclosure that were taken at my direction by the CSI.
And is it a fair and accurate depiction of what the door looked like on February 8th, 2022?
It is.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would enter into evidence States Exhibit 13A through C.
Any objection? Court receives and accepts States Exhibits 13A through C as in Charlie in evidence without objection.
Permission to publish?
Granted.
Now publishing 13A. What is this a picture of?
That is a photograph of the exterior of the door, highlighting the deadbolt, which was on the exterior of the enclosure, as well as the regular door knob lock, which was also on the exterior of the room.
What is a deadbolt?
A deadbolt is a locking device that most, probably everyone here has at their residence to secure from anyone entering or exiting an enclosure or room.
And that lock was only on the outside of the door, right?
That's correct.
What about on the inside of the door?
On the inside was only the spot where you'd have to put a key, so there was no way for, if that door was locked, for anyone on the inside to exit.
What about the lights? Did you notice any lights in the enclosure?
Yes.
And what about the light switch?
The light switch was also on the exterior of the room. It was to the left of the door in this photograph.
1 minute, Your Honor.
Granted.
Now, you stated that you had gotten that search warrant from Ring, correct?
That's correct.
And you were able to access all about 21,000 videos?
That's correct.
Okay. And you said that you had reviewed those videos before?
That's correct.
Your Honor, I'm showing opposing counsel what's been previously marked as States Exhibit 14. This is just the first two. I need to add on to it. It's just the first two. May I approach the witness?
I'm sorry?
May I approach the witness?
You may.
I know it's hard because it's a USB, but I'm showing you States Exhibit 14. Did you have a chance to review the Ring videos on that USB?
I did.
Okay, and are they a fair and accurate depiction of when you made contact at the Ferriter house on January 30th of 2022?
Yes, they are.
And these were obtained through the Ring search warrant, correct?
That's correct.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would enter into evidence States Exhibit 14.
Any objection?
These are the first two on the door.
Your Honor, may we approach?
Apologize for that technical issue there.
And just for the record, is States Exhibit 14 entered into evidence?
Yes, Exhibit 14 is entered into evidence over objection.
Permission to publish?
Granted. And let me just be clear on that ruling, Ms. Black. Over objection is to the first two videos on Exhibit 14, without objection as to the third video.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
Judge, I'm not sure how the record knows what the first, second, and third video is. Sub 1, sub 2, sub 3.
Why don't we mark them by reference to the file number there, because that's what it's going to show up on the thumb drive. So which one is the video 3?
Video 3 is 1643600155000.
All right, so that's the one that's admitted in evidence without objection. The other two videos on that thumb drive are admitted in evidence over objection. So I think that's clear for the record. Yeah, we're going to bring you a mic, Mr. Wade, so you can have the assistance of the technology here. I mean, as much as this room is mic'd up, it's a big room, and if you aren't close to a mic, you don't get recorded. That's why I'm kind of anal about it.
Of 2022, correct?
That's correct.
And is that the day you spoke to him at JPD?
That's correct.
And was he wearing what he's wearing here?
Yes, he was.
Okay. So this is what he looked like.
So just to explain real quick, there was a lot of breaks or sections that I had to cut out because there was no audio at all. So that happened towards the end of the prosecution's examination. So now this is the defense cross-examining the prosecution's witness. It kind of just jumped to it with no notice. So that's all it is.
At that time, correct?
That's correct.
All right. I'm going to move defense 1 into evidence.
Any objection? All right, court receives and accepts defendant's exhibit 1 in evidence without objection.
All right, defense 2.
It's 1 in evidence, and we did mark the prior, so let's keep it sequential. Let's keep it, the first exhibit will be 1 for ID purposes, which was not admitted, and the objection was sustained. So this will be exhibit 2 in evidence without objection. Are you okay with that numbering, Ms. Murad? I don't want to screw your numbering up.
Whatever number you all want to use, I'm good with.
So that way, we keep the original 1 separate, even though it's only ID. All right, so, all right, in any event, 2 comes in evidence.
Your Honor, I just want to make sure that it's for defense exhibit 2, that's just that snippet and not the entire whole video.
Correct.
That is correct.
That is it. Just that section of the video that you saw. Now, at some point, you and other SWAT officers executed a search warrant on the home of the Ferriters, correct?
That's correct.
That was on February 8th of 22?
That's correct.
And the pictures that we saw on direct were after the execution of the search warrant?
That's correct.
And it was after the officers had already gone through and looked at everything that they needed to look for, correct? They were executing a search warrant, so they'd gone in and looked around the house?
They'd gone in and cleared the residence to make sure that the residence was clear and safe and made sure that it was okay for me to go in and look for evidence that I needed, yes.
All right. And and then it was after that you then had CSI come in and take the pictures that you just introduced on direct, correct?
That's correct.
All right. And the officers that you were with, including yourself, were all wearing body-worn camera, correct?
That's correct.
And you walked through the house and you could see the layout of the house and all of the rooms exactly as they were at the time where you first got there, correct?
The layout was the same, yes, that's correct.
And the way it looked is the way it looked when you first walked in on February 8th of 22, correct?
That's correct.
So those body-worn cameras would be a true and accurate depiction of what the house looked like, both the layout and the physical objects in the house on February 8th of 22.
That's correct.
And that body-worn would be earlier than those crime scene pictures, correct, in time?
That's correct.
Okay. This time, Judge, I'd move to introduce body-worn camera from February 8th, 22, the execution of the search warrant on the Ferriter home.
Do you have the exhibit?
We do.
All right, so it's what exhibit? Exhibit 3?
It's a video.
Exhibit 3, right? Okay, all right. Any objection?
Yes, Your Honor, we would object. We approach.
You can approach. All right, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, we're going to take another break. I need to review some video before I have it presented to you, if at all. So that means we're going to take a quick recess for you, and we'll call you back as soon as I've done what I need to do out here. So don't get too comfortable, but it'll be, I'm told the video is 13 minutes, and I do need to review it prior to making an evidentiary ruling. Me to review. Yeah, so Ms. Murad, thank you. Go right, I only want you to show me what you're intending to play before the jury and what will be admitted into evidence. And I think you also need to state clearly on the record which body cam segment it is for which officer so that it's readily identifiable for record purposes?
I don't actually, I would have to look and see which body worn camera it is. When I was provided it, we don't necessarily get that. I didn't have the evidence.com link. However, this is a body worn camera. I'll put it in the exhibit. It's 2022. I'll figure out a way to identify it. And we're starting this at 4:20.
Okay. Yeah, just turn it so I can see it.
And this is Defense Exhibit 3. It is the body worn of the execution of the search warrant
Okay.
on December 8th.
All right, you can hit play, and this is a 13-minute segment.
No, it's being played from 4:20.
Looks about 8 minutes, I guess.
Your police department search warrant. Next slide over here. Your police department search warrant. Good look. Your police department, get a search warrant for the resident. Please step out of the home, do it now.
Yeah, open door right, and I have a long hall party, it's gonna lead for the kitchen hall.
You're the police department. We have a search warrant for this resident. Please step out of the home, do it now.
Move the whole right, not even gonna make a left. Just go and be on that thing.
You're the police department. We have a search warrant for 277, Grand Point North. If there's anybody present in this residence, please step out with your hands up, do it now.
All right, Jay, on slide. Yep. They want me to move on.
Yep.
Do you guys have a ball? Yeah, we have a ball.
All right, thank you.
So I'd make a note at 5:19.
Open room left, open room left. Police department search warrant. Open room left. Hold it. Kirill, come here, shield. Shield. You're the police department, search warrant.
You want to come block this?
You're the police department, search warrant.
Oh, yeah. You guys want to do work? Take that from yourself.
You're the police department, search warrant. Clear.
All right, we're gonna clear this one.
Hold. You're the police department.
Give me one. Give me one.
Gotcha. You're the police department, search warrant.
On the back room and on the level, we'll come here. All right, let's go this way first. Yeah. Hold this seat right here. Hold that.
You're the police department, search warrant.
Clear. Who coming out?
Oh, we got all the pieces on.
Yep.
All right.
Hold.
You're the police department, search warrant.
Clear. Look on that. Closet. Clear. From the right there? Yeah.
You're the police department, search warrant.
Go ahead and push hold this. Go ahead and push hold for safety. Go here.
Jared. Jill, right here. Push, push, push. Jared, pull. Jared, pull out. Jill, good. Yeah. Hold that long.
Hold it over all the way.
Yeah, hold that. We'll work over there. Yes. You're the police department, search warrant. Police department, search warrant.
I was saying,
Go and push that wall. Jill.
this is gonna be for your honor.
With you. Police department, search warrant.
Yeah. I'm gonna open it.
You're the police department, search warrant.
Over here. Open room left. Keep going. Slow. Right here, this. With your feet here and hold that. Yep.
I'm with you. Hold that.
I'm with you. Good.
You're showing my hair on the road today.
That's clear.
Right.
Open your mouth. Open your mouth. Open your right. With me. I'm gonna roll in there. Check go outside. Yeah, come on. This is locked. Clear. So, let's go clear. Coming back to you. Blue. Okay. Hold it first. Hold that for me. All right, tell you guys. Sound you holding? Okay. Police call search warrant. Police department search warrant. Let's lead into your police department search warrant. You're going to police search warrant. Clear. Yo, once you pop that load right here. Good. All right. Ready? Two. Police department search warrant. Police department search warrant. Okay, cool. That's it. Police department search warrant. That's clear for now. Clear. Yeah, and then we have, hey, can you pull out the third ladder? Yeah. All right. Yeah, go ahead and clear that. Check the back patio. Just stand by and check the back patio. All right.
That portion should not be shown. Also,
Up to what portion?
I know they started at 4 minutes and 20 seconds. The beginning 4 minutes and 19 seconds should not be shown. So if they're starting it at 4 minutes and 20 seconds, that's fine. But the fact of the matter is that this is the execution of the search warrant. The detective was not part of the execution of the search warrant. He was present after the fact or even at that time, but he did not himself go into the house until after when the CSI was taking pictures. And the fact that there's weapons drawn, there are officers that have like the protective shield, none of that is relevant to them showing the layout of the house. If they want to show the layout of the house, there may be a different body worn camera to do that.
All right, response, Mr. Wade, and then I'll make a ruling.
Thank you. So I laid foundation with the detective. The detective was there. It's really a question of does this truly and accurately depict the layout of the house?
Yes, but in a way that's probative and not unduly prejudicial. And that's a concern I have. So I want you to address the prejudice argument, because after seeing the video, I have some concern about prejudice of showing that. And there being much more available means to show the layout of the house without having the potential prejudice of showing guns drawn by law enforcement on the execution of a search warrant.
So I don't know who the prejudice is to, but the fact is that the layout of the house, first of all, this is the first time they go into the house, is the best evidence of what that house looked like before any law enforcement touched anything. Secondly, the pictures that were introduced of each room don't actually show the proximity and the distance. For example, the garage to the kitchen, and it's one short hallway between the two, that where the master bedroom is, where they decided to put the toddler, which is right across from the master bedroom. It also, when you have the video going through the house, you get a sense of the size of the house. This is not a 5,000, 6,000 square foot house. This is about a 3,000 square foot house. You also get a sense of the proximity of the children's rooms. They go in and there's one room, bathroom, room. These are all very tight. These are generally small rooms. You get a better sense of that, the size of those rooms.
Mr. White, are you telling me there are no other body-worn cam videos that don't have weapons drawn that can achieve the same purpose of showing the layout of the house?
So we looked through to find, so obviously all the officers who are breaching have weapons drawn. So we went through for those officers who first go in to see. Now, I think the officer whose body camera we have shown the court has the least amount of time where there's a gun in the picture. As you could see most of the house from that. It's not blocking the view, which is why that one is selected. And I think every officer upon entry had a gun drawn. So there is not one picture or video of body worn on entry without a gun or a shield.
All right, so I did not hear a question about Officer Ryan, I think it was Coleth, whether he had a body-worn camera. He was the first one there. He went and observed the structure, the first witness. Are there any other? The very Ryan Colnick. He didn't. All right. The first officer that went inside was whom? He did not have a body worn.
On a prior day, so we didn't have a body worn on that.
All right. So, is there any body worn camera that shows the layout of this premises at any point in time, at or near the time of the alleged incident?
And after the breaching, where the officers are walking around the house during the execution of the search warrant, but there's not a walkthrough. Okay.
All right, my ruling is I'm going to sustain the state's objection. I find this, quite frankly, to be unduly prejudicial to both sides, and the prejudice is outweighed by the probative value of merely showing the layout of the premises. It's without prejudice to the defense to use other means, other body-worn camera segments to show the layout in a situation that's not nearly as energized as what's shown on this body-worn camera here. So if you've got other body-worn camera that shows the layout or where the rooms are situated or what's in the rooms where guns are not drawn, I will allow it. But I'm not going to allow the playing of this video before the jury. Let's have this marked as Defense Exhibit 3 for ID, and it'll be part of the record for appellate purposes. All right. Mr. Wade, are you ready to continue with your cross?
I am.
All right. You may go ahead and have the jurors brought back out. Let's go ahead and take that off the screen.
And the date range was from December 28th, 2021 to January 31st, 2022. December 28th, 2021 to January 31st, 2022.
All right. And in that month and a few days, there were...
My position is, you stated by those photographs, if I could speculate, if it appeared that they had just moved in. By those photographs, no. By their testimony and what was told to me, I was advised that they had just recently purchased the house, and I was advised that they had just recently moved into the house. Those photographs, to me, it didn't appear that they had just moved in.
When you came to the house on January 30th, that was the first time you came to the house, correct?
That's correct.
And Tim Ferriter was not at the house, correct?
That's correct.
And you subsequently learned he wasn't even in the country at the time, correct?
That's correct.
No other questions?
Any redirect? Yes, Your Honor. All right, you may begin, Ms. Black.
On cross, you were asked about seeing Ronan defecating in the Home Depot box?
That's
or
correct.
The bucket? Okay. But you said that you did not see that on video.
That's correct.
That was not on the video in the Jupiter home, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. But he did speak to you about what had happened in Arizona.
That's correct.
Your Honor, I have no further questions.
Okay, is this witness excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, sir, that concludes your testimony. You may step down.
Okay, just to give you an update where we're at, We have two things left. There's a 5-minute sidebar, and then there is a 38-minute testimony of one of the Ferriter children. I believe it's the oldest daughter.
All right, so ladies and gentlemen, for the next witness, we need to set up the technology so that it can be properly presented to you. So it's going to be about a 10-minute process. I'm going to have you retired to the jury room again. It won't be that long. As soon as we're geared up to present the testimony to you through the technology, then we'll have you right back out. One may be seated. Before I let the attorneys leave for the other courtroom, is there any special instruction that the state wishes the court to read regarding the in-camera testimony that they're going to be seeing?
Your Honor, I'm not sure about the camera, but I do know that Ms. Coakley did print out a instruction of evidence of other crimes, wrongs, or acts, since they, I believe that the witness, Fiona, will be talking about Arizona, and I know that Your Honor had introduced that evidence as well as well.
All right, so two things. I will read that instruction, but I also think because this testimony is being presented to them in a way that is not the normal process with somebody on the witness stand, that I can just give them an instruction off the top of my head that they're to regard this testimony the same as they would any other testimony received in this courtroom and to consider it for all purposes. Any objection to that from either side?
I know I should.
Okay.
My recommendation on the Williamsville one, though, is I'll alert you, and then I'll just stop, and you are going to start.
Okay, so you'll let me know at the appropriate time that the state wishes to have that read. That's fine with the court.
Sequestration, it hasn't been an issue, but if I could just invoke.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, the rule of sequestration has been invoked, and that is a rule of evidence and procedure that says that if there are any prospective witnesses that are in the courtroom, you must leave and remain outside of the courtroom until you are called as a witness. That's designed so that the witnesses do not get the opportunity to hear any other testimony prior to their own testimony. Once your testimony is concluded, usually the witnesses can remain in the courtroom after that time and view the remaining part of the proceedings. I do rely on counsel to tell me and keep track of the gallery to tell me if there are any witnesses that you intend to call that have come into the courtroom and alert me as quickly as possible so that I can make sure that they're asked to leave. Are there any witnesses that are in the courtroom right now that either side intends to call? No, all right. Has either side seen any witnesses during any of the testimony thus far of people in the courtroom that they would intend to be calling as witnesses in this case?
She does have a listed witness here, but I don't know if she intends to call her. I assume not.
Yeah, I don't intend to at this point, but we can have her step out in an abundance of caution.
Yeah, I think in an abundance of caution, you should have her step out if she's on the witness list, unless you formally excuse her from the list.
Because there are out-of-state witnesses that have watched some of the proceedings via Zoom, I do want to make that clear that that applies to any of them. I don't know.
I've advised all my witnesses not to even watch it on television.
The rule applies to all witnesses, whether you're in this courtroom or whether you're here virtually through Zoom or whether you're watching through some televised proceeding of this trial. You're not to be viewing the testimony of any witnesses that have testified prior to you. You can be asked that on your direct or cross-examination. So I would tell all witnesses that are listed or they're expected to testify that if you are on Zoom, you should not be listening to, in fact, you shouldn't even be on Zoom right now while we're in the testimony phase of the case until such time as you've been called. Once your testimony is concluded, then you could log back on and observe the proceedings. Ms. Coakley, how long is it anticipated for you to do what you have to do in courtroom 10G?
I think it'll probably take us like 10 minutes.
All right, so anything that I need to address beforehand? All right, so we're going to...
Scheduling-wise, the state is not going to have any other witnesses today.
Okay, so let's shoot for 10 minutes so that we squeeze every bit out of the day that we can today. How long is this witness expected to take?
I think that the full hour should be enough time.
Okay. All right, so let's definitely try to get it all set up within the 10-minute time period. And then IT is going to set it up here, so you'll give me the thumbs up from courtroom 10G once you're ready, and then I will give the instruction to the jurors prior to the start of that testimony.
This can be like done during the testimony. I'll let you know.
Okay. So is Ms. Black going to remain in this courtroom? Okay. All right. Good enough. All right. Good enough. And
Ms. Morales,
All right, so we have all bases covered with counsel present in the courtroom and the court. Okay, good enough. All right, so Ms. Coakley, you go get set up, and Mr. Waheed, you're going to be in the other courtroom, correct? That's correct. All right, court will be in recess for 10 minutes, and IT can go ahead and set up my system now. All right, thank you, Ms. Black. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, the next phase of the proceeding is going to be the testimony presented to you via remote technology. I need to let you know that both sides have agreed in advance to the presentation of the testimony of the next witness in the format that we're presenting it to you. This is live testimony. This individual is in another courtroom, happens to be my main courtroom that they're in and set up for the direct and cross-examination. The thing that's important for you is, even though this is being presented to you remotely, you're to view it and consider it and listen to it the same as you would if this young lady was sitting here in the stand, on the witness stand in this particular courtroom, just because of the way it's being presented. It's being done remotely at this point in time. So with that, and again, you're to consider this the same as you would any other testimony and disregard the format in which it's being presented to you. With that, Ms. Coakley, are you ready to call your next witness?
We are, Your Honor. At this time, the state would call Fiona Ferriter.
Okay. All right. At this time, I'm going to have the clerk in courtroom 10G, if you could go ahead and administer the oath to Ms. Ferriter.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the evidence you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do.
All right. Ms. Coakley, you may begin at your convenience.
Thank you, Your Honor. Could you please tell us how old you are? And what grade are you currently in? Now, tell us a little bit about
Ms. Coakley, Ms. Coakley, I have not heard her last two answers. Let's do a mic test on her.
So the judge indicated that he can hear, so we're going to try. You go ahead and give us how old you are again.
All right, that's better. All right, and just stop for just.
Acceptable, Your Honor?
That is acceptable, but I want to just get a sound check and a video check from the jurors. Video is fine as far as the distance. And if you have any problem with sound, raise your hand so I can alert them as quickly as possible. All right, that's good. Ms. Coakley, you may proceed.
Fiona, I think you're a little soft-spoken, so because we're dealing with these mics, we're just going to try and you speak as loud as possible, if that's okay. Okay. So you said you're 17 years old? Are you nervous about being here today? Is this a topic that you like to talk about? No. Is it kind of embarrassing to be here and have to talk about these things?
Okay, I'm going to, Ms. Coakley, Ms. Coakley, I'm going to have your assistance to make sure she does everything she can to project, because she has a very soft voice and it's not coming. If I'm not hearing it, I know my jurors are not hearing it. So, Ms. Ferriter, as best you can, even if you have to feel like you're shouting, make sure you project, okay? Do you understand that, ma'am?
Yeah, I understand.
All right. Go ahead, Ms. Coakley.
When you are nervous, I noticed you giggled a little bit. Is that a nervous tick that you have?
I see that a little. Yeah.
Now, we're here to talk, you here to talk about more or less?
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about how your family was made up in January of 2022. So that's right when you moved back to Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Who was part of your family at that point?
So my parents, my sister, and my brothers.
Okay. What were your parents' names?
Mm-hmm.
And tell us about your siblings. What were their names? Okay. Who is the oldest sibling in your family? Okay. Who's second?
All right. Ms. Coakley, they're still having a problem hearing her. So, Ms. Ferriter, I'm going to...
IT here. She is speaking like very close to the microphone and pretty clearly here. We're going to see if IT can help us.
All right. So let's see if IT can increase the gain. And I'm going to ask you to go back to the last two questions because I think that's where she dropped off. Maybe we can increase the gain on that mic.
Which?
Gunnar, I think he's gonna switch mics for us. And so if you just give us one moment, well. Okay. What if we can,
Judge, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. Her voice is very soft, though. I'm sure that's part of the problem. All right, I can hear you fine. Hers is a voice we need to test, though.
She said the testing 1, 2, 3.
Can you say testing 1, 2, 3? Testing 1, 2, 3.
All right, say that again.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
All right, as long as you keep that level, I think we can hear you, but don't let your voice drop off. You ever been on the sidelines watching a sports event and yelling? Don't be afraid to do that here, so go ahead.
Okay.
Fiona, I think you were telling us about the makeup of your family in December of 2022. I asked you, you said you lived with your two parents. What were their names?
Timothy and Tracy.
Okay. And you said that you lived with 3 siblings. Tell me the 3 siblings' names.
Ronan, Nola, Pierce. Yeah, Ronan, Nola, and Pierce.
And you said that you were the oldest sibling. What's the next sibling in the age order?
That would be Ronan.
And then who comes next?
Nola.
And then who's the last?
Pierce.
How close in age are you to Ronan, approximately?
2 years?
Okay, so you're 2 years older?
Roughly.
Okay, so you're 17 now, almost 18?
Correct.
And so that he's about 15, just turning 16 approximately?
16-ish, yeah.
Yeah, he just turned 16?
Yes.
And how far away is between Ronan and Nola in age? If you don't know, that's okay.
I'm not entirely sure.
Are you guys kind of relatively close in age?
Yeah, we're all relatively close.
Within a year or two of each other?
Correct.
Were you close in grades in school?
Correct. Yes.
And how about Pierce? Is he close in age?
No.
Okay, how old is Pierce now? Approximately.
I want to guess 4.
Okay, so he's kind of, through much of this, was a smaller baby or a toddler?
Yes.
Okay, while you and your sister Nola and Ronan were much closer in age?
Yes, you were.
Okay. Were you originally born in the United States?
No.
Where were you born?
I was born in China.
Okay. How did you end up coming to the United States?
I was adopted.
Okay, and who were you adopted by?
Tracy.
Do you know how old you were when you were adopted?
No.
Were you a baby or a toddler?
I could walk, sort of, so maybe in between.
Okay, so little though.
Yes.
Okay. Now, do you know whether or not your brother Ronan was born in the United States?
Yeah. No, he wasn't born.
Okay. Do you know where he was born?
Vietnam.
Okay. Was he also adopted?
Yes.
Okay. What about Nola? Was she adopted?
No.
And Pierce, was he adopted?
No.
Now, you said that in January in 2022, everyone lived together. And where did you live? What city did you live in?
We lived in Jupiter.
Is that in Palm Beach County?
Yes.
Now, growing up in the time that you were living in Jupiter, or maybe once before, who was kind of the rule maker for your parents?
Timothy, my dad.
Was Tracy involved in enforcing the rules or making the rules?
She helped support the names.
Okay. But who was the one that dictated what the rules and what you had to follow?
Tim.
If you had a dispute or disagreement about a rule or whether or not it was fair, is that something that you could talk about with him?
Not exactly.
Okay. And why is that?
Because he would reason us out of it, or I just wouldn't be able to say anything.
Was he the disciplinarian in the house?
Yes.
Now, I want to talk about, you said in January of 2022, you guys lived in Florida. When did you come to Florida?
We moved roughly in December. I'm sorry, the years are a little confusing.
So I think we said January 2022 is when you were with when you guys lived together as a family.
Correct.
And did you move that December right before?
Yeah, December previous.
Okay, so that would have been December of 2021?
Correct.
So the time frame that we're talking about, is that like 5 or 6 weeks?
Roughly.
That you lived in that house in Jupiter?
Yes.
Okay. And you moved to Florida. Where did you move from?
We moved from Arizona.
How long had you been in Arizona at that point?
Approximately 5 years.
Prior to Arizona, where did you live?
Florida.
So this was your second time coming back to Jupiter, Florida?
Yes, it's been that time.
When you lived in Florida before, was that like elementary school age, much younger?
Yes, up until fifth grade.
Now, when you moved back to Jupiter, what neighborhood did you move into?
When we moved back,
Yeah, in
Egret Landing.
what type of house was that?
It was a small one-story house.
Okay, single family home?
Correct.
How many bedrooms did it have?
3.
Who had the bedroom?
So the master bedroom were Tim and Tracy. Nola and I each had our own bedroom. And then, yeah, I guess if you want to count the one in the garage as a bedroom, then that's where, Pierce had his bedroom in the office. They made that into his own room.
Okay, and you said that that I wanted to count something in the garage. What do you mean by that? What was in the garage?
They had a room built for Roman.
Who had it built?
My parents.
Okay, so Tim and Tracy had that room specifically built into the garage?
Correct.
Okay. Is that room already there by the time you moved?
I don't remember.
Okay, but was it there at the very least shortly thereafter?
I saw it at least.
And when we say that it's in the garage, was everyone else's room in the main house?
Correct, yes.
And Ronan was the only one that had to stay in the garage?
Yes.
Now, I want to show you what has already been marked as evidence and shown to the jury. There's some pictures of your home, okay? And so I want to see if you recognize any of them. You mentioned that you had a bedroom. I'm showing you what's been pre-marked as evidence as state 7A and F. Just take a look at it and tell me if you recognize whose room that is.
Yeah, that's my room.
Okay. And now I'm going to show you what's been marked as evidence as states 5A through D. It's another bedroom in the home. Whose bedroom is that?
That would be Nola's.
And then I'm going to show you what's been marked as evidence as states 4A through D. And you might need to flip because like one's a close-up. It's fine to do that.
Yeah.
Do you recognize like, what room that is?
Yeah, so this one's Pierce's room.
And we see some mattresses on the floor there. Is that how it was when you lived there? Were there mattresses on the floor in Pierce's room, or was there just a crib in there?
There was a lot of things in there. I can't remember specifically.
Is that a place where like Ronan slept?
No.
Okay, so just Pierce slept in there by himself?
Yes.
Okay. Now I'm going to show you what's been marked as evidence as state 6. Tell me what that shows.
Bathroom.
And I'm going to show you what's been marked as evidence as state 9. What does that show us a picture of?
That's the garage.
And in stage 9, you said that there was a structure built that your parents specifically built in the garage. Can you see it in that picture?
Yes, it's behind the racks.
Okay. Is that white building?
Yes.
Okay. Let's talk about that white structure that's in the garage.
Yeah, that little white box in there.
Let's talk about it. Did that have any windows?
No.
Did it have a lock from the outside?
Yes.
Did it have any access from in the garage to a bathroom?
No.
Okay. And did it have lights inside of it?
I can't remember.
Now, is that the room that Ronan slept in?
Yes.
Is that room, other than just sleeping times, did he spend time or was he put in that room?
Yes.
Okay. Was Ronan allowed to be in the house by himself?
No.
Was he allowed to walk freely through the house?
No.
Was he allowed to do something like watch TV in the living room?
Not alone.
Were you allowed to do that?
Yes.
Was your sister Nola allowed to do that?
Yes.
What about snacks? Was there food freely available to Ronan in the kitchen?
No.
Would he be allowed to go and take a snack out of the fridge?
No.
What about get a drink of water if he was thirsty? Is that something he would be allowed to do?
Maybe water if someone watched him.
Only if someone watched him. And only if he's out of the room.
Yes.
Were you allowed to take a snack if you were hungry?
Yes.
Was your sister Nola allowed to get a snack if you were hungry?
Yes.
Were there times that you would receive special treats, like, desserts or snacks?
Correct. Yeah.
What would happen in those instances? Would they be shared with all of your siblings?
We usually rewards, and usually Noah and I receive them. It wasn't often that Tyler also received.
Okay. Are there some times that once in a while he would receive a reward?
Very rare.
But were there times where you and Nola were getting a reward and Ty was not included in having special treats or snacks?
Yes.
Are there times through the, in this household growing up, were you someone who was observant of how your parents treated your other siblings?
Yes.
Did you watch and listen to things that were happening?
Yes.
Throughout your childhood?
I did.
Are you an observant person?
I would consider myself to be.
Did you ever see Ty or Roman get punished?
Yes.
Was the type of punishment that Ty or Ronan got the same type of punishment that you or Nola would get for the same type of conduct?
No.
How was it different?
It was either more extreme or something completely different than what we would receive.
Were you ever locked in your room or prevented from leaving?
No.
Did you ever have to go to the bathroom only in a bucket?
No.
Were you ever required to be alone in your room in the dark?
No.
Were you and Nola allowed to have phones?
Yes.
Were you allowed to play games on your devices?
Yes.
Was Ty allowed to play games?
No. Not unsupervised.
Was he allowed to have a device?
No.
Now, you said that you saw Ty, through your time in Florida, or Ronan, get punished. Did you ever see him get punished for little things?
Yes.
Like what?
For me, it'd be just not answering questions. Maybe he plays a little too rough with one of us, or he talks back.
When you say he wasn't answering questions, what do you mean?
Let's say he did something wrong and they asked him about it. He wouldn't say anything. He just wouldn't answer them.
And what would be the response to that?
If he didn't answer them to a certain point, he'd be sent to his room. Or if he did answer, he'd still be sent to his room.
Right. And when he's sent to his room, is he then allowed to leave?
No.
Is he locked in there?
Yes, he did leave. I don't know if he was locked all the time, but I know he wasn't allowed to leave.
Did you see both Tim and Tracy force him into the room? Make him go into the room?
I've heard both of them tell him to go into.
And did you see both Tim and Tracy involved in the punishment and discipline?
Can you be more specific?
Well, there's some things that one person did or the other person did, but were they both?
They were both involved with the punishment.
Now, over time, growing up with your brother, did you notice him become less communicative?
Yes, he shut down.
Okay. Did you notice him over time, especially toward the end, become more withdrawn?
Yes.
Did he smile less?
Yes.
And that's something you noticed kind of as his sibling?
Yes.
Now, I want to talk about specifically right now the time in Florida. What was your observation about kind of how often he was in the room?
How often he was in the room?
Yeah, did you see him around the house very often?
Not inside the house.
No. Where would you see him?
Outside.
Okay. Tell me about that. What would he be doing outside?
Yard work, moving the outdoor furniture.
So when he's outside, is it like that he has the opportunity to freely play?
No, it's not. And it's not for entertainment.
Okay. What kind of yard work is he doing?
At the time we were moving in, so it was mostly moving supplies outside of the house.
Okay. Was there some yard work or landscaping involving shelves that he was required to do?
Yes.
Okay. Is that something that you were required to do?
No.
And did you see him doing that?
Yes, I did see him moving the shelf.
And you said that you would observe him outside. When he was told to go outside, did he have the free option of coming back into the house?
No.
How would that work?
So if he was put outside, one of them would know that he's outside. One of my parents would know he's outside, and then if he got done with work, he'd come and wait for them to let him back.
Okay, would he be allowed to just come back in?
Not unless someone was watching him.
Okay. And are there times when he would be locked out of being allowed back in the house?
Yes.
And then when he was let back in, would he then be able to relax around the house, or what would happen?
Not really. He'd either go to his room or just go somewhere to be monitored.
Okay. Now, in your house, did you eat meals with him regularly?
No.
Where would he be while you would be eating?
Most likely in his room.
And what about when you would get home from school? Would he be with you doing homework in the kitchen or the living room?
No, he did most of his homework in his room. I didn't see him very often.
You didn't see him very often out in around the house?
Around the house.
Okay, so when you saw him, when he was home and you were home, it's, for the most part, was he one of two places?
Yes.
And what are those two places?
Room or outside.
Were you allowed after school to come and go freely around the house?
Yes.
And your mom, was she around during those times of the day after school?
Yes.
She didn't work?
No.
Were there times that the defendant, Tim, in this case, was also around?
Yes.
In the house?
Yes.
Would he sometimes do stuff with either Pierce, you, or Nola? Like after school, would Tim or Tracy do things with you all after school occasionally?
We would eat meals. I can't think of.
Okay, but Ronan wasn't with you when that happened?
Not often.
Now, when you say not often, was there one or two times that he was out and allowed to eat meals?
He would sometimes eat with us.
The majority of the time, though, was he there?
Not that I can really recall.
Now, you, at that time, were you involved in any activities at school?
I was here.
Yeah, here.
I was a part of the marching band and band in general.
Were there some times that you had football games or events that were related to the marching band?
Yes.
Sometimes on those occasions, did your brother come to the event?
Not that I can recall, but.
Where would he be during those?
If my parents were coming to it, he might have been with them or he might have been at home.
Okay. And when he was left home alone, if your parents were at your event, was he allowed to be out freely in the house?
No.
So were there family events that you or Nola went to where your brother is left home alone at the house?
Yes.
Did you personally even get the opportunity to see him very often during those 6 weeks in Florida?
Very, like passing outside maybe, or through the window.
Even when he was at home?
Yeah, so I would see him like maybe moving yard work, I'd see him through my window, or maybe he'd get briefly come in the house for food or whatnot.
Now, was there a time in Florida where your brother ran away?
Yes.
And do you remember that happening?
Yes.
Was it over a weekend?
I believe so.
Okay, and what, did you end up staying at, what kind of happened when he was gone? Where were your parents?
So, I was left home alone. I believe Tracy was with Nola at softball tournament, and Tim was, as far as I know, not present in the house.
Okay, so he's out of town maybe? Yes. And you said Tracy left.
Yeah.
Where did she go?
I believe she went with Nola to softball.
Was that like in Jupiter around Palm Beach County, or was it out of town?
I don't remember.
Okay, but were you home alone?
Yes.
While your brother was missing?
Yes.
Were you allowed to let him back in the house?
No.
If he came?
No.
Now, I want to talk for a second about another time frame. And Your Honor, now would be the appropriate time to read that instruction.
All right, so ladies and gentlemen, I have an instruction on the law that I'll be reading to you this time. FF and RF concerning other crimes, wrongs, or acts allegedly committed by the defendants will be considered by you for the limited purpose of proving motive, opportunity, intent, preparation, plan, knowledge, or corroborating the testimony of EM, and you shall consider it only as it relates to those issues. However, the defendant is not on trial for a crime, wrong, or act that is not included in the information. You cannot convict the defendant for an offense he is not charged with. Instead, he can only be convicted of the crime for which he is charged.
Now, I want to talk with you about, we talked about kind of the time frame in Florida. Prior to Florida, you said you lived in Arizona.
Correct.
Tell me about the house that you lived in Arizona. What city did you live in
I lived
Arizona?
in Tucson.
Okay, tell me about the house you lived in.
It was a one-story house.
How many bedrooms? What did it have? Tell me about that.
So there were 4 bedrooms.
Who, when you first lived there, who were the bedrooms assigned to?
So when we first initially moved there, it was Ronan, Noah, and myself.
And then did your parents have a separate
Yeah,
bedroom?
master's bedroom.
Okay. So you said your sister, your brother, and you each had an individual bedroom?
Yes.
Okay. And was your brother's bedroom inside the house?
We're talking about Ronan?
Ronan.
Yes.
Now, how old approximately are you when you kind of first moved to Arizona?
I just finished the 5th grade, so I don't know what that age range
Okay, so you're in about the 5th grade?
Yes.
And Ronan is younger than you?
Yes.
So he's in the 3rd or 4th grade
Yes.
at that time?
Oh, wait, no, moving?
When you first got to
Yes,
Arizona?
we had just, yes, sorry.
So is it right to say that he was probably in the 3rd or 4th grade
Right.
at that point, elementary school?
Yes.
Okay, and Nola also in elementary school?
Yes.
Now, at that point, you said that he had his own room.
Yes.
That room, was it like an ordinary, regular room, or was there anything different about it?
No, it was basically a mirror of Nola's room.
Okay. Could he go and come freely in that room?
Yes.
Okay, at some point, was there any kind of lock placed on that room?
There was a latch.
Tell me about that.
There was a little latch attached to the top of the door frame. It had little keyhole thing.
So tell me, what does that mean for the person that's inside the room?
You can come out.
Okay, so it could be latched from the outside?
Yes.
Did you see that there were times when he had a room in the house that it would be latched from the outside and he'd be locked in that room? Would he be locked in that room in Arizona?
Yes.
Did that room have a bathroom?
No.
Now, is there at some point a time where he no longer had a room in the house?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
When our youngest son, Pierce, was born, they had a room built into the garage.
Okay. Tell me about the room that was built in the garage.
No windows. It looked it had no windows. It had an AC unit, a bed, and sometimes a bucket, or sometimes his bottles were in there, but they were taken out.
Okay, tell me about that. Was there times, how that happened?
So like about the items in his room getting taken out. If he got in trouble, if something happened, they would get moved out all the way out of his room, or if he had like decorations, when he would get upset, he would take them off the walls.
Okay. And when you say they would take everything out of the room, what would be left in the room?
His bed and a small desk where he would do homework.
Now, you mentioned that the room was built into the garage. Was that house the same as the Florida house? Like, was it all on one level, or was it something different?
So the Arizona house?
The Arizona house.
And yeah, it was on one floor. The garage, yes, had steps going down to it, but it was all on one.
Now, that room in Arizona, did it have a bathroom attached to it?
The guy's room?
Yeah.
No.
Did it have any windows?
No.
Did that room lock from the outside?
Yes.
Did that room have any kind of smell?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
It did not smell good.
How come?
He had his bucket in there, which he would use to his bathroom. And sometimes if he didn't have a bucket in there, it'd just be on the floor.
Now, were there times in Arizona, like in Florida, where your brother would be in that room for long periods of time?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
It's roughly the same idea as the one here when we did in Florida. He got in trouble, get sent down to his room, but it's more of getting sent down. More often he was getting sent to the room.
And then how long would he be in the room for? Would it be long periods of time?
It would be long periods. I can't say off the top of my head.
Are we talking like all day?
Can I just say there were some days that I didn't really see him that often?
Yeah. And so you didn't see him that often. Was he like not at the house, or where was he?
He was in his room or again outside.
Okay. So was the situation in Arizona similar in that he spent a lot of time in the room by himself?
Yes.
If he wasn't in school, where was he most of the time?
Are we talking about in Arizona?
In Arizona.
In Arizona, outside doing yard work or in his room.
Now, we talked about in Florida, when he's outside doing yard work, he couldn't just come back in. Is that the same in Florida?
Yes.
What would happen? Like, where would he just stand outside, or how would that work?
Yeah, so if he was doing yard work finished, he'd come stand outside and just wait, or one of them would go meet him outside. And by that I mean my parents.
Okay. Was he allowed to just come back in himself?
No,
Would the door be locked?
I can't.
Okay, you don't know whether or not it was locked.
I don't
It's okay,
know.
I don't want you to speculate. But was he allowed or freely able to come back in?
No.
Okay. Now, when he's outside, is he have under direct supervision there?
No, not all the time.
So he's just kind of out there by himself?
Yes.
And your parents, Tim and Tracy, are someplace else?
Yes.
Now, you said that was roughly around the time that your brother Pierce was born. Who ended up taking over your brother Ronan's room when Pierce was born?
Pierce took Brian's room.
Okay, so that became the new baby's room.
Yes.
And you said that Pierce is now, how old do you think he was now? Around 4-ish,
I want to say.
Okay. So was it approximately how many years do you think was the special room in Arizona? Just an estimate.
Oh, like how?
How long before you moved to Florida was he kept in that room?
So the one in Arizona?
The one in Arizona, before you came to Florida?
Pierce was roughly 2 when we got here, so maybe more than a year.
So approximately 2 years.
Roughly.
Roughly.
That he's been in a room. That's not
Before you came to Florida?
Yes.
Okay. And how old were you when you came to Florida?
So moving from Arizona to Florida.
How old were you?
So, I'm sorry. I think I got confused. Wait.
It's okay, take your time.
Okay. So when we moved to Arizona, I had just finished the 5th grade, and then when we moved back, I was in the middle of my sophomore year.
Okay, so you were in high school?
Yes.
When you came back to Florida?
Yes.
And your brother was in middle school?
Yes.
Now, we talked a lot about your brother being in the room in Arizona. Were there times where you were concerned about whether or not your brother was getting food or being fed regularly?
Yes.
What would you do when that happened?
If I saw there was a plate for him, sometimes I'd be able to take it and just run it down to him really quick. And otherwise, I really couldn't do anything.
And when you say you brought it down to him, where would you have to bring it down to?
To his room downstairs in the garage. This is Arizona, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so downstairs, his room there.
Are there times over the course of when you were living in Arizona that you ever saw your father, the defendant, be physically aggressive towards your brother?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
He would grab him by the back of the neck and just kind of haul him down to his room. That was the most common one that I saw.
Would you be able to see what was happening once they're down in the room?
Once they're in the room, no.
Would you be able to hear what is happening?
Yes.
Tell me what you heard.
I would hear him curse at him, yell at him.
And you saying I would hear him curse at him. Who
Sorry,
cursed?
I would hear Tim yell at Ryan.
And would you hear him curse at Ronan?
Yes.
Okay. What else would you hear?
I would hear the sound of contact, so like slapping or hitting or something. And then I'll hear my brother scream.
Now, during these interactions, are they like is Tim, the defendant in this case, like rationally explaining or calmly explaining the change in behavior or what your brother did wrong?
No.
Is he angry?
Yes.
How can you tell that? Like, what makes you think that he was angry?
It was really loud and it didn't really seem much like an explanation. It just felt like he was just shouting at him.
Was your brother in trouble with your parents or on punishment with your parents a lot of the time?
Yes.
Did it seem like he basically was always in trouble?
Yes.
Did it seem like even when he did things that were positive or appropriate, that was acknowledged?
Objection, speculation.
Based on what you saw?
Objections overruled. Objections overruled.
Wait, before answering.
The objection was speculation, correct? Overruled.
Based on what you saw, when your brother was acting in the way that your parents wanted or doing positive things, was that acknowledged?
Briefly.
Okay. Did it lead to like a change in his circumstances or improvement about how he was treated?
Briefly.
Okay, and when you say briefly, what do you mean by that?
It maybe went for a week or so, and then something else happened. He did something else. He got himself in trouble and didn't go back to the way it was.
Was the ways that he got in trouble, to you, did it seem proportionate to what you knew he got in trouble for?
No.
Did it seem extreme, a reaction?
Relevant, her opinion.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that objection.
It was relevant, Your Honor?
Relevant as to her opinion.
All right, overruled. Go ahead, Ms. Coakley.
Can you answer that
Sorry,
question?
can you repeat it?
Yeah, did the punishment seem appropriate or proportional to
No.
what he was doing?
No.
Did the majority of the things that he was punished for, are they minor types of things?
From what I saw, yes.
Now, I want to talk about how your perception of in both Florida and Arizona.
Okay.
Did you ever feel a time that you were unsafe around your brother?
Unsafe as to
Physical harm.
like him harming me?
Yeah.
No.
No. Did you at any time, did he ever threaten you or anything like that?
No.
Did you ever see him intentionally cause physical harm to any of your siblings
No.
or your parents?
No.
That's all the questions I have.
All right, Mr. Waidi, any cross?
Gotcha.
Okay, we're going to take a short break. Mark, you can escort the jurors into the jury room for a very...